Hello,
evening,
everyone. Hi, good to see you all.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here. We are so excited about the launch of Fund 2 and grateful for everyone that has already invested in Fund 2. Lots of phone calls this past week and really excited about our webinar tonight.
We're off to a running start here. It looks like we've already had 11.2 million in total commitments to Fund 2 here in advance of the webinar. So thanks to everyone who has so much confidence in the fund, or maybe they missed the opportunity to get into Fund 1 because that ended up filling in a single night. We're excited to have you here and excited that we were able to throttle this process. It was kind of a scramble with how quickly Fund 1 filled, and I'm grateful that we've been able to have calls with everyone and give everyone the customer service level that I think they deserve and we expect of ourselves. So we're excited to go through all the details of Fund 2. Talk about Garden Court West and Naraville apartments here. So lots of exciting stuff.
Definitely starting from the same place we started with Fund 1, which is just a place of really tremendous gratitude for all of you, our longtime investors, our newbie investors, those of you that haven't yet invested and are just interested in learning and hearing about us. When we raised Fund 1 in December of 2021, that really defied all of our expectations. We work with some of the best coaches in the industry, the best attorneys, best accountants, and we had assumed it might take us maybe a month or so to raise Fund 1, especially because we launched it December, I think 16th, so right around the holidays. And we were able to enter into that webinar with all of the capital raised that we needed to acquire the Nicholas and Oliver apartments. And so I start that webinar by saying, I just get to show up tonight and be with everyone and enjoy everyone and answer questions and teach you about our business and teach you about the fund and the opportunities that we have. And that's exactly what has happened with Fund 2. So
even the same ratios, it seems like.
Exactly. Yeah. So we needed to raise about 11 million for Nara Villa. And we've hit that number. So thank you to everyone that has placed your trust and your capital with us earlier in the process. That certainly makes it much more enjoyable for Nick and I to just show up at the webinar and connect with everyone. And I just really want to thank you all that it seems like no matter how far Nick and I, push the line, raise the bar, whatever phrase you want to say, you guys just keep showing up. And it really is like the honor of our lifetimes to be able to serve all of you. We take it very seriously. You're going to hear a lot of kind of typical talk that you'll hear in a webinar about our pro formas and those sorts of things. But we really take capital raising, what I think is to the next level. And so we talk a lot about values and the privilege that we get to have to steward your capital. And we know that capital is a proxy for hard work that you've put in and dreams that you have for the future. And I just want to take a moment to thank you all. It really means so much to us.
I think one of the most salient, memorable moments of the whole, Fund 1 launch for me was she might be on the Fund 2 call right now. I don't know, but she just emailed us and said, I'm praying for you. I'm praying for you to make good decisions. There's a lot of people who have put their trust in you, and I've put my trust in you and my hard saved dollars. And I don't know. It's just, it impacts me to this day. It's a responsibility that we do not take lightly in the slightest.
Nick has to tell that story because when I try to tell it, I get all choked up. So we launched the fund on a Thursday and we got that email Sunday morning. No doubt she was preparing for church or that sort of thing. And we were on her prayer list. And just a really impactful moment. I think one we'll never forget.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
let's dive in. Yeah. So, we tend to go long for those of you that don't know, those of you that have been with us for a while. I hope you have your drinks and your snacks and got your feet up. For those of you that are new, welcome. This isn't your typical kind of 30-minute spiel and then we're done. We like to answer every single question we possibly can, provide as much information as we possibly can, and really do our best to serve you. We know that any type of investment is a huge decision. And so our goal is to make sure that everyone gets as much of us as they possibly need to feel very comfortable with any investment decision that you make. So I expect we'll go for a while tonight.
Yeah, so we're going to hit a couple of highlights basically at the top end of the show tonight, so to speak. So we think kind of the most salient questions that people have, we're going to try to hit those first, and then circle back around to some of the most important things that we think, talking about our values and why we have structured the fund the way we have and our investment thesis. But basically, almost like an FAQ, the first half dozen slides in the presentation. So hopefully we can answer your questions, especially if you're a repeat customer. If you're coming back from Fund 1, you're probably curious, what's the difference in Fund 2, and to learn more about our anchor asset here, Nara Apartments. And as you can see on the slide deck there, we do have Fund 2 open for general commits at this time. So feel free to log into the portal. I can see on my feed there a bunch of people are logging in right now. So feel free to proceed with your commit whenever the spirit moves you. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Shall we get started?
I think we shall.
Let's do it. All right. So this is the official public launch for Black Swan Real Estate Fund 2. We included a picture there of Nicholas Apartments. So that's our cornerstone asset of Fund 1, to give you some sense of our history. Nara Villa, which is our cornerstone asset for Fund 2. We are so excited about this asset and cannot wait to tell you all about it, and then also about our other success in Tacoma. And then this is a picture from earlier in the year. So we are doing a townhome ground up construction project, 115 townhomes, and Fund 2 has the potential to potentially invest in a new construction project. We don't have anything lined up yet, but it's in the PPM that could be included. So that's a picture there. And then of course, our lovely bird, our Black Swan. Yeah,
Stonehaven has been extremely successful. New construction is certainly, a really exciting effort to undertake. It's a related but a little bit different, a little bit new skill set for us to master. So we undertook that entire project, all the whole 115 multi-phase project on our own with our own capital there. We did bring in some investors for phase 1 for the stabilized phase, while the new construction we did on our own, and then. Nicholas Apartments, we did our Q1 performance report for 2022, and we hit a 115% rate of return on the Nicholas and Oliver investment in the first 3 months of operation. So blew away even our most optimistic projections. I think Elaine and I are probably almost so conservative in our projections that it really kind of holds us back. So we need to think about that carefully, but it's just how we do it. And just an unreal level of returns that we've been able to hit in Nicholas in the short time that we've held that asset. And we're projecting, similar outcomes for Nara Villa Apartments. We're very excited about Nara Villa as well. We think it's going to be an out of the park home run, just like Nicholas and Oliver have been.
Absolutely. A little bit of housekeeping for our webinar tonight. So we have several members of our team. Rachel, Mark, and Riley are here to support you in chat and to compile any questions so that we can see those and answer those. We will do our presentation first, and then as we see questions, if they fit in, we'll kind of weave them in, but in general, we'll save questions for the end. But we'll answer questions as long as we need to. I think last time we went for like an hour and a half or 2 hours just of Q&A. Chat is open.
We're here until every question's been answered.
That's right. That's the goal. Chat is open. So you'll have both a chat function and a Q&A function. I would like for everyone to use chat. Everyone can see that. So feel free to put questions there, and Riley and Rachel and Mark will compile those.
Absolutely.
All right. Let's get the disclaimers out of the way here.
This is the most exciting part of the whole presentation.
That's right.
Basically, it's important to note, so we're going to reference our past outcomes. It's important to know that past outcomes are not necessarily indicative of future results. They're probably the best indicator there is, but just because we've been really successful with similar investments in the past, do not necessarily mean that we're going to be similar with those exact same investments in the future. All investing is risky. There is potential to lose money. We are not accountants. We are not attorneys. We might talk about depreciation and different ways you could maybe optimize your investments to capitalize on those features, but we are not attorneys or tax advisors. We have a Reg D 506C SEC filing for Fund 2, so you need to be an accredited investor to participate, and there's a minimum 100K to invest. So just a few important things to throw out there. So we've got our general disclaimer there. And then we've got our financial disclaimer after that as well. We'll make sure we leave these up on the screen for just a minute so our attorneys are happy with us. We use Premier Law Group, Mauricio Raoul. I think one of the top attorneys in the business, does the fund structure for some of the kind of household names in our industry, so to speak. and they always like to.
We're going to be a household name soon.
I think we're working on it. Yeah.
That's our goal.
And so just giving some airtime here to our disclaimers to make sure that our attorney is happy. We also use Brandon Hall, the real estate CPA. He's our personal accountant. We really love the just fantastic guidance and advice that we get from our professional advisors.
Absolutely. In terms of a little bit of housekeeping for the portal, so that's blackswanfund2.com. That's InvestNext. So InvestNext is an ultra secure portal for raising capital. So in there, you're able to find the PPM, the operating agreement, the slide deck. And then the way you go through that is you make a commitment. And then if you feel ready, you can sign the PPM. And then if you felt ready, you can even submit funds via ACH. So that is the most secure way to transmit funds. It's slower and more secure than the wire network. That is what we encourage right through InvestNext there. If you need to wire in funds, wiring instructions are safely in the portal. And that's the only place that will share wiring instructions. So just know that we would never email wire instructions or anything like that. Really trying to make sure this has the highest level of quality and security with our portal there. And with Fund One, there was a little bit of kind of confusion about how that worked. So just know that you need to kind of go through that process of making a commitment and then signing your PPM and then submitting your capital. We were kind of lackadaisical with Fund One because we had no idea it would fill in one night. So for Fund Two, it is first come, first serve as capital comes in. If you need time to move capital around, say from stocks or whatever, just email us and let us know. And we'll make a notation of that, and we would be able to hold your spot. Signing the PPM gets you in the InvestNext next kind of column to save your spot.
Yeah. If you have any technical difficulties, feel free to ping Rachel in chat. It's kind of strange, but the vast majority of the calls that I've done here the past weekend were just tech support, which is helpful because I had 15 years in IT before doing the real estate thing here, so I got to fall back on that and do a lot of tech support calls. Like, hey,
InvestNext is like the most secure software out there, but it's not the most intuitive software.
I think the security works against you. It's never going to accidentally send any money, but it might make it a little bit hard to send money in certain circumstances. And it looks like we've already gotten about a 500,000 of additional commitments here, so we're off to haven't even shared an actual slide of the presentation yet. So.
This is also our largest ever presentation. So it's pretty fun.
We're at a full house here. We actually upgraded to the webinar, upgraded our Zoom license here for this webinar. We got so many RSVPs, so we're excited to have a full house.
Yeah. A little bit about us. I know there's lots of new faces tonight, and so we're trying to blend kind of serving our existing investors who already know a great deal about us with also serving you, our new investors. So please allow us to introduce ourselves. I'm Dr. Elaine Stogberg. This is my lovely husband, Nick. We have the great joy of being married, living together, raising 4 amazing children together, and then also running this business. We're very, very fortunate.
These numbers are always kind of moving, but we have a real estate sales team. We're in the top 1/3 of 1% of all Keller Williams sales teams. That's where we hang our license here is at Keller Williams. So it's the largest real estate organization on earth, 180,000 licensed agents. And we're in the top 1/3 of 1% there. So we're very elated to be part of that elite group. We're actually part of Gary Keller's personal mastermind, which is probably one of the most, if not the most elite real estate mastermind in the world. So it's just a personal invite basis from Gary Keller for that mastermind. We're excited to be part of that. We have over 200 million in assets under management. Here shortly we'll be at a $250 million once we close on Nara Villa and a few other assets here. So that'll be exciting. We can move up to the B's, $250 million. I like saying that.
I like that. I like that.
200 million.
So to go back to speak to how much gratitude we have for all of you. We set a goal less than a year ago of getting to $1 billion in assets under management we kind of said 5 to 7 years. I think we're going to
like a huge number.
It did, right? It seems so unattainable. I think we're going to hit that in, let's say, let the record stand that I say 3 years.
So we have this little Google Doc that I created called Prognostications of the Oracle. It's predictions that Elaine makes, and she's rarely wrong. So I'll have to jot that one down here when we're done with the webinar.
Yeah, you all need to help me make that happen.
That's probably the most important metric that we track is our assets under management. Every dollar of AUM that we add increases our economies of scale, increases the level and quality of service that we're able to offer to our investors, to our tenants. So we're really excited to see our company level up there. We've raised tens of millions of dollars successfully over the years. We've always repaid principal and interest exactly as expected. We're doing $40 million in ground up construction right now. And that's in addition to having about 50 renovations going right now. So we're renovating numerous apartment buildings all concurrently. It's a beautifully controlled chaos, really challenging right now with supply chain issues and labor shortages. And there's a lot of headwinds there, but we have really good systems and processes and just an incredible team to manage all those renovations.
Chaos is a compliment in our language.
Yes, it is. And then we have about 40 million. It's getting closer to 50 million now of just assets that we own ourselves. So we think that that's just a beautiful thing to own an asset on your own, and that's a big part of our portfolio as well.
Absolutely. These are our 4 beautiful children. So Selah there in the middle is our oldest. She's our girl. Shepherd is our oldest boy there in the gray shirt. Micah's our middle child. He's the one who is rapidly taking years off of my life. He's in the cream colored shirt there. He is 2 and a few months and just runs all over the place. And I actually have nightmares about him running places because
all of the mobility, but no frontal lobe.
That's yet. Right. And he definitely is a middle child. So the older 2 are a little more stable and they kind of stay close to mom and dad. Our baby, we just wear on our chest all the time. And then Mike is just out there causing chaos. Yeah. And then that's our little boy, Abram. He is 2 months old today. He was born on April 6th.
Time flies by.
Yeah, I was pregnant with him for Fund 1.
Yeah, when we flew out,
it's easier to stand for several hours, not 6 months pregnant. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah, he was 3 weeks old when we flew out to Tacoma for due diligence on Nara Villa. We brought the whole crew out, the whole family and our nanny. We love to do deep due diligence. This isn't just a in and out in a day kind of thing when we're doing real due diligence on an asset, and we bring the whole plan.
Absolutely. Let's jump into the similarities and differences between Fund 1 and Fund 2. Lots of you are already invested in Fund 1, and lots of you have likely watched the Fund 1 webinar. So that's what we've been telling people over the last several months, is that Fund 2 would be so similar to Fund 1 that any time you spent researching and understanding Fund 1 would be time well spent. So lots of you have watched that replay video. And in this slide, we're going to very succinctly describe how they're the same and then also how they're different.
Yeah, so they're 99.9% identical. Basically, we're going to potentially do new construction, and then we're going to work with operational partners in other geographies, and that's pretty much it. That's the only difference there. The splits are the same, the structure is the same, the fees or the fact that there are no fees, it remains identical. So that's pretty much it. We're going to have a really cool anchor asset for Fund 2, just like we had for Fund 1. Fund 1, we just got done kind of deploying our first tranche of capital. So that was kind of the starting pistol for Fund 2. So the day we spent the last dollar in Fund 1, that's when we launched Fund 2, basically.
Yeah, this is how it went. So we've had Nara Villa under contract for a while, but we're not closing until July. So we're kind of like, well, do we raise in May? Do we raise in June? And one day, about 2 weeks ago, we were driving and I all of a sudden said, Nick, we've spent all the money in Fund 1 because we're buying a lot of homes in Fund 1 with cash so that we can re-lever them and get the best leverage on them as quickly as possible. And so that made the decision of when we would launch Fund 2. So here we are. Fund 1 has just been amazing. We got an amazing proposal today to lever the, I think, 29 single family homes. 27 yep. that we have either purchased or under contract.
Could be 29. I maybe lost track of them or something like that. But
it's near 30.
Yeah.
So Fund 1 is moving along better than we could have imagined, and we are very excited about Fund 2.
Yeah. So let's talk about our anchor asset here, Nara Villa Apartments. So it's a 130 units, 1970s build, your typical garden style, Class C, C- apartment building. It's never had any renovations done in the whole history of the building. So it's a blank slate, so to speak, for people who like to do renovations such as ourselves. We have it under contract at $24.15 million. We're estimating a $12 million cash to close on that asset. That includes a very hefty amount of construction financing and the interest reserve for that construction loan. To be honest, our projections for the value of this asset when we're done with it are high. They're very high. We will conservatively say 36 million because it seems like the sky is going to be the limit with this thing when we get it to where we think it can go. But for the moment, we know that we can very easily get to after repair value, after renovated value of 36 million, which would get us to a full cash out refinance and be able to return all capital to our investors, which is ultimately the end goal for our business model here. We're going to do just a crazy renovation on this property, exactly like we've done with a sister asset here, Garden Court West, that we already own. It's a few miles away from this asset. We'll talk about Garden Court West here in just a second, but we're going to totally reimagine what this community is and what it's going to feel like. Right now, it's a community for 55 plus individuals. The current ownership group, I think it was kind of clever. Maybe 20 years ago, they said, okay, this asset's starting to look kind of dated with all these original finishes. I know we'll make it for older individuals, and then they won't think that the finishes seem so old. They were fashionable finishes in the day, you know, for people who are older. So a clever strategy. But today, Tanara Villa is located in an area that is rapidly transitioning. So Tanara is less than 3 miles away from Point Ruston, which is a 100-acre, 1 mile oceanfront master plan community, like $1 billion, you know, it's probably several $1 billion master plan community, class A+++. Just a phenomenal location for Tanara Villa. It's in a young, hip neighborhood with new fashionable restaurants, that sort of thing. That the 55 plus angle just makes no sense anymore for this type of location. And so we're going to, you know, reposition it to be an asset that, you know, appeals to the younger demographic that's now the prevalent demographic in that area. Critically, this area, it's not a distressed asset. Like everything's actually in like a really good state of repair, kind of like when you go to your grandparents' house and everything is perfect, but like super dated. That's exactly what this asset is. And we're unbelievably excited to have kind of a blank slate to work on here from a value add perspective, from a renovation perspective.
Yeah, Tanara, just the way it is set up would be unlike anything that, you know, really anyone could build today without extravagant costs because of the land. So there's this beautiful lawn in the middle, which is very nice. You know, a lot of the units face into that lawn, but it's just empty grass. And so we envision a huge change to a shared living space, really tapping into that Pacific Northwest culture and weather and everything. And you know, it's hard to explain how expensive this would be with new construction, because no one would leave this much space in the middle. So we're really able to take something that is in, you know, pretty good condition, needs a lot of love and attention, was built well, and just has kind of, you know, run out its lifespan, and totally revitalize it as Tacoma has changed over the last, you know, 50 years. So just really couldn't be, you know, more excited about this. And then we'll also share our success at Garden Court West, which is literally just a few miles down the road. And we're doing almost the exact same business plan there.
Yep, there's a photo of that center green space there, the courtyard. There's a crazy amount of really valuable dirt underneath this apartment building. So we're going to have just an incredible, you know, recreational area and outdoor living area. You know, it's a very mild climate in Tacoma. You can hang out outdoors, you know, year round. And we're going to really maximally leverage that space.
Yeah.
We also have some photos of the unit interiors there. So you can see they've got some, you know, white, very dated appliances, let's say some 30-year-old appliances, some laminate counters that have been refinished at some point. So they took the original laminate counters and painted them. And
which is so antithetical to what we do. Yeah.
So we're going to go in and we're going to rip everything out and put in all new, you know, premium cabinetry and quartz counters and premium stainless steel appliances, and just totally reimagine what the interiors look like. We also found a random, there was a swan sighting on the property there. So we just, we're always looking for omens there. And so we liked that there was a little swan sitting in front of the leasing office.
It's even like a little bit black, like not all the way, but it's kind of
a dirty swan. Yeah.
Love it. So a little bit more about Tacoma. We've really had a wonderful time building our relationship with Tacoma over the past several years. So like Nick said, we took our children out this time. So this park here is Point Defiance Park, just a few miles away from Tanara Villa. Really just a beautiful park, lots of walking trails, beautiful things to look at. And then this over here is Point Ruston, which was what the big development that Nick just talked about. And so when we see things like that, we're going to talk about Tacoma there was an email we sent out, I think earlier last month, that we really dove into a lot of the metrics of why we like Tacoma. But when we see a community that has a really solid foundation, which Tacoma does, and is connected to a much bigger city with a great culture, so that's Seattle, and then also has a great deal of development, population growth, and job growth, for us, that's a winner. Mm-hmm. And we see that in Tacoma. And so Tacoma really mirrors Rochester. Mm-hmm. So a lot of our assets are right here in Rochester. And we really think of Tacoma Tacoma is to Seattle as Rochester is to Minneapolis. And so we were able to find this wonderful community that has a lot of the same metrics as Rochester, partner with a rock star partner who has a lot of our same business values, the vertical integration. We'll talk about that here. Proven success with Garden Court West right down the street. And then this just amazing development that's really bringing the whole community up.
Yeah. Tacoma is probably one of the most interesting transition stories in the entire country right now. So you think Tacoma, it used to be a place of extraordinary heavy industry. So Ruston, Point Ruston used to be an EPA Superfund site.
Yeah.
And it took decades to clean up the industrial pollution in the area. There used to be what they called the Tacoma aroma from all the different industrial sites. It was a heavy industry community. Mm-hmm. And there are tens of thousands of these workforce housing apartment complexes that have been built in Tacoma for workers who used to go work in these heavy industrial plants. And now those heavy industrial plants have gone and they've been cleaned up and replaced with Class A++ redevelopments. And now it's all young knowledge workers who commute into Seattle for working at Microsoft and Amazon and just the tech culture there. So just an extreme transition event that's happening in Tacoma that's I would say somewhat exceptional in the entire country. Is really unbelievable to walk Point Ruston and mm-hmm. just try to imagine that this was a factory. It was the majority of the copper for the entire world was smelted on this site for like 100 years or something like that. Mm-hmm. And they had to clean up all the industrial waste that accumulated there to redevelop it. So mm-hmm. Just a fascinating transition that's happening there.
I just noticed that Micah's head's poking up here. You can tell he's in our wagon. This was no doubt me saying, stay in the wagon so you don't run away. Yeah. Right. So let's talk about our business plan for Nara Villa. So we have basically 4 phases here that we're going to talk about. The first is our first 100 days. So we are big believers in taking massive action right after closing, really having that business plan all laid out and getting to work on it right away. So in the first 100 days will be new management. So that's our partners there. Again, vertically integrated, really important to our value system that there's that vertical integration to drive quality, control, and consistency. There's a lot of vacant units. So, as Nick said, this is a 55 and older community, which just doesn't quite fit the demographics of Tacoma right now. And so there's a lot of vacant units, and we can start filling those with just sort of market rate tenants right away. Our targeted rents for that first 100 days just to fill up vacancy is $1,250 or perhaps $1,300. Doing some common area improvements. That's the fastest way to benefit all residents, right? Is to improve the common areas before going into individual units. So doing corridor lighting and paint, that really helps to change the way someone feels right when they walk into a building before they ever even get to their individual home unit. And then an exterior locking system. Younger people like a more up-to-date locking system with like electronic keypads instead of keys. It's also much more secure where you can tell who's coming and going, disable access, those sorts of things. So that's always the first thing we do on all of our buildings. And of course, we're doing that at Nara. Doing a few renovations in that first 100 days, just 4 units, and then planning for rent increases for current tenants. We tend to go a little bit slower than perhaps the industry norm there. We're big believers in keeping communities stable and treating people really well. So we'll do like a 60 or 90-day notice of rent increases. So we do have that plan for the first 100 days, but certainly not the first thing we do right out of the gate. When
we were there walking units, there were residents who were literally packing and they're like, oh, the place is selling, so we got to go. And we're like, no, that's not how this works. Like you have time. There's going to be a lengthy transition here. we try really, really, really hard to work with tenants. At Garden Court West, our asset down the street, pretty much all of our turnover has been just organic attrition. So we really have not had to aggressively turn over any units there. We think critically about the impact that our business has on society, and making sure that we're making the neighborhood and the community a better place with what we do, and something that we remain really sensitive to. So we probably go a little slower than we could, but we just think that's the right thing to do.
Awesome. Year one, we will start charging for parking. So all around the outside is plentiful street parking. And so we'll start charging for that. We'll also allow pets and have a pet rent fee there. Black Swan is very pet friendly. We always joke we should be named Black Dog Real Estate. We think everyone should have a dog or a cat. Right now, there's no utility bill back. And so that's becoming an industry norm. And so we'll implement that. Really work on that exterior space. So doing painting on all of the buildings, really putting literally millions of dollars into that common living space in the middle there. I think our projection there is like a $3 million renovation just in that middle space. We've hired an amazing landscape architect who's working on Garden Court West, and we're just going to move them right down the street to keep doing their fantastic work on this asset. Doing some more common amenities. I'm not sure if the common area amenities picture made it into this presentation or not, but we'll make sure we share it in our Facebook group or something. Right now, the only thing the entire community has is a community room that has some chairs, perhaps from 1989,
something like that,
and some VHSs.
It has an extensive VHS library, and multiple VCRs for those VHS cassettes, and some 27-inch CRT televisions. And someone put that community room together about 1990 or so, and it's just been it's been perfect ever since.
It is time for us to come in and add a fitness center.
And they have it advertised on apartments.com too. It's a kind of hilarious photo that they're nailing their target audience with the 55 plus. So
we'll add a fitness center, an office, a lounge, and then also a co-working space. So again, we're really excited about bringing in that younger vibe to really fit the demographics of Tacoma right now. Renovating 25 to 35 units with a target rent there of over $1,500, and then continuing with rent increases.
So, as we get into deeper years here, it gets a little bit fuzzier, but implementing, dog park, completing our exterior renovations, ultimately getting to, rents in the 17 to 1900 range. At Garden Court West down the street, we've gone from $900 a month to $1,900 a month in less than a year on that asset. So just a staggering transformation on that asset. And I would say that everything you see here is relatively conservative. We never want to be too aggressive, but when you have a blank slate like this, like the amount of upside potential you're able to generate, the amount of value you're able to create is staggering, especially in a Class A location like this. Yeah,
we tend to be very conservative in our underwriting. Those of you that have been with us for a long time are seeing that, that pattern unfold. We always ask ourselves, are we hampering our success because we're so conservative? But that's just what we like to do. We like to sleep well at night. So this is our plan. We're going to talk about, our previous successes, but then we tend to be pretty conservative with underwriting. Lori asked a great question. I'll address this one right now. Are there any legal restrictions from converting it from a 55 plus community to an all age community? The answer is no. There's no, specific land restriction or covenant or anything like that. It was simply a management decision that was made some time ago by the previous management, as Nick said, simply because they didn't want to renovate. So this was their kind of creative strategy to work around that. So there's no covenants there whatsoever. Very good question.
There's a question there about rental rates. So it covers the spectrum. So at $2,000 a month, we are nowhere near the top of the market for rental rates in this area. We probably should figure out how much it is to rent a unit at Ruston Point. I wouldn't be surprised if it's $3,000 to $4,000 per month for a single unit. I'd say the floor of the market is probably around $900 per month. So Garden Court West is at the floor of the market, and Charterville Apartments is about at $1,100 to $1,200. There's some legacy tenants that are at very low rental rates, but new units are leasing at $1,100 to $1,200.
Good questions. Let's talk about our amazing partners. We have just been so fortunate to develop a friendship and a business relationship with this family and this team over the last several years. So this is the Casey family, Daniel and Shirley Casey, and their 3 children. We love to get together and talk about the chaos of
Mm-hmm.
lots of kids, and they're a little bit ahead of us in the parenting journey. So when we were spending time together most recently, I'm holding a newborn and they're talking about their oldest graduating high school. So it's just a lot of fun to have the privilege to be friends with them, to do business with them. Nick and Daniel meet about once a month somewhere in the country in a mastermind that they're both a part of. And then we spend time visiting Tacoma to visit Gardenport West.
And we meet once a week virtually. So Daniel is the leader of the multifamily group within the GoBundance Mastermind. So I would say most of the household names in the industry are a member of that mastermind. Daniel is a very quiet guy. The last thing on earth he'd ever want to do is get up in a webinar like this, but just an absolutely brilliant person at doing what he does, which is, multifamily construction, over 120 million in construction expertise with his construction company, with a focus specifically on multifamily renovations. Just does phenomenal work at an extremely low price, vertically integrated business model, just like ours. And, really, it's not like we went to Tacoma and looked for a partner. We looked nationally for the best partners, and Daniel was absolutely, our top person that we wanted to be in business with. And then when we looked at Tacoma, we said, hey, Tacoma is a lot like Rochester, and there's just a lot of opportunity here to partner together. So
yeah, we're such big believers in, just that life unfolds exactly the way it's supposed to. So we had been in Tacoma about 4 years ago, specifically to do due diligence. Say that 10 times fast.
Due diligence.
Looking for places in the country, because we know that Rochester is a relatively small town, and we have big goals of $1 billion or more of assets under management. So we need to go to other markets, and we visited, drove around, had real estate agents show us lots of different properties, spent a lot of time really getting to know that community, and had it on our very short list. And then when we met Daniel, he happens to be in Tacoma, so it was really just this merging of we're big believers that the universe is always working for us. And this was a perfect example of that.
Absolutely.
Tell them a little bit about, it's completely unrelated to multifamily construction, but tell them about what Daniel does on bridges.
Oh, so yeah, he's just a brilliant mind. So one of his areas of expertise is doing high stakes jobs. So if like a drunk driver or a semi-tractor trailer crashes into a bridge, he is the guy that gets the call, and he has all of these trucks and machines and tools to like heat up the steel girders and bend them back into place and fasten them and reinforce them. So you have to have like tons of structural engineering knowledge, but then also tons of applied knowledge. Like, hey, if we pull on this girder, is it going to break off, or is it going to bend, or do we have to heat it to a certain temperature? And how do you even know what the temperature is before you bend it? And we've already bent that once, now it's going to break, even though it wouldn't have broken before. Or someone has hit this spot once before and we repaired it, now someone hit it again, and now it's going to be, we have to have a different strategy. So you think about the stakes of doing that kind of work, and the kind of elite team that you have to have in order to pull. And then of course it's all extraordinarily time sensitive. So when a bridge is out in this neck of the woods, like, the economic impact is massive. So you're working, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to get this bridge back into service as fast as humanly possible, but also safely. And there's probably an army of city officials and engineers just like staring at you, making sure you're not making a mistake. So that's what Daniel does for fun. That's his excitement project kind of thing. Like, he just gets the call randomly that, hey, someone just hit a bridge in Northern California. If it's west of the Mississippi and it's a certain type of bridge or structure,
his team is the team.
His team is the team.
Yeah, no doubt. Many of us have driven on bridges that he has cared for.
I don't know what the metaphor is for that, but that he likes to do that in his spare time is pretty cool.
Yeah, we love that their team is vertically integrated. So Daniel has helped with sourcing the project. He'll sign on a full recourse note, just like Nick and I will. His team will do all of the construction, and then his team will do all the property management. So we're certainly, in partnership with a team that is exactly modeled like the Black Swan team. We joke that we tried to come up with a clever name because they're BlackRock and we're Black Swan. But
total coincidence, by the way.
Yeah.
What are the odds? Yeah.
And just for clarification's sake, Daniel's team will be over to Nara Villa, but not over the entire fund. Any assets in the fund that are not to Nara Villa will be managed by
no involvement from Daniel.
Exactly.
And it's also worth mentioning that so Daniel has the exact same like property management model. Just by coincidence, essentially, which is an extraordinarily rare property management model. So the same model that we have, so vertically integrated and an all-in property management model in terms of how revenue and expenses are handled. We even use literally the exact same countertops in our renovations for Garden Court West and Nara Villa and Stonehaven. So we're constantly working on what can we do to step up our game and find more efficient finishes or better finishes or something like that. So tons of consistency across the entire portfolio.
Yeah, we're having our Black Swan Real Estate Real Life event here in Rochester this year. That's July 15th, 16th, and 17th. And next year, the plan is to have it in Tacoma, and we're super excited about that.
It'll be fun.
Let's talk about Garden Court West. So I would say a common question that we get from people who have been along for the ride for a long time know that we're heavily invested in Rochester and ask why Tacoma. So we've been investing in Tacoma for over a year with the Garden Court West project. There's another project that Nick will talk about here. And that really follows our model, which is we tend to do kind of our first round of things a little more privately. We often do it with our own capital, really absorbing any of the risk of that learning curve. And then we offer those investments to our investors. So we do have investors in Garden Court West. I think we brought in maybe 5 or 6 partners on Garden.
Very small group. Yeah.
Yeah. But this, predated the Black Swan Fund, but it's certainly the business model that we're just taking right down the street for Nara Villa. So we purchased Garden Court West at $9.8 million. This is a 64 unit, 1965 construction. So about half the purchase price, half the size, generally the same year for construction. We walked into that with quite a bit of day one equity. It appraised at $11.8 million.
Let's put a fine point on that. So we bought this thing for $9.8 million, and the appraiser said the day of closing we already had $2 million of equity in the
20%.
Deal. Yeah, 20%.
Right, because a lot of people will say like, well, 2 million, but that's often on like a $75 million community.
Yeah, we got an insane deal on this asset. It needed a lot of work. It was just more than most groups were able to handle. But when we got it under contract at a really favorable price and showed our business plan to the appraiser said, "Wow, like this is there's a lot of opportunity in this property here."
Yep, absolutely. So we have a large, just our renovation budget for just the interior is 1.4 million, 23,000 per unit. So what we don't do is things like painting over countertops, kind of light value add. We are long-term vision people. We envision owning these assets for decades. So we put in new cabinets, new countertops, new plumbing, paint everything, new flooring, new trim. Basically, if it's a part that can be improved by replacing it, that's what we do. So we are very much different from the industry of kind of, maybe cleaning things up, putting some lipstick on things, and then selling just a few years later. We're big believers in deep value add, and that's what we're doing here at Garden Court. Yeah, so there's an excellent example there. So there's a pre of a kitchen and then a post. So you can see all new cabinets, subway tile backsplash, quartz countertops, a higher end sink and faucet, stainless steel appliances, just really, doing something that we're going to be proud of for 20 years and that will drive return for 20 years, drive satisfaction from residents, and having that long range vision in mind.
Absolutely. Couldn't be more proud of the quality of our finished product. I hope anyone can look at these photos and see how we could drive massive, massive value to a community with these gut remodels. So we're not just kind of putting lipstick on things. We're doing deep, deep value add. And that's how we can go from, $900 per month in rent to $1,900 per month in rent.
Yeah. So we projected a 100% return in year one, and that came through our renovations and really increasing the value of the asset. So we're getting it appraised here in the next how long? Maybe 30 or 60 days?
Something like that. Yeah. We're going back and forth with the bank. We're swimming in equity in this deal. Everyone agrees that there is a massive amount of equity in this deal. We were going to do a cash out refi. We're hoping that we're going to be able to hit that cash out refi before Fund 2 launched, and people could roll their capital from Garden Court West, down the street into Fund 2 into Nara Villa. And that's really the vision right there, is being able to return capital swiftly, so that capital can go into the next investment and the next investment and the next investment. That's when this business model really catches fire. And this is the basis for all the wealth that Elaine and I have created to date.
And all of our investors wanted to either roll their money into Fund 2, and one of them wanted to join us on Stonehaven. And so I'm sure many of you are listening. Just thank you so much for your belief in us. When we made those calls about the refi, and there was a 100% rate of people wanting to roll into Fund 2, that certainly it means a lot to us. Yeah, we take that very seriously.
So we got to like the final approval at the bank, and they said, "Wait a second, you bought this thing like 9 months ago? No, we're not going to do a cash out refi yet." Which we're in that situation with multiple properties right now, where we have tons of equity that we've created, tons of value that we've created, but just getting the bank to sign on with that can be a little bit challenging. Once you hit the 1 year mark, it gets a lot easier. So we're looking forward to resuming that when we hit the 1 year mark, maybe in September or something, and see if the bank's feeling better at that time. We're also going to be working with the same bank on Nara Villa that we worked with on Garden Court West, so we're very excited about that. Sound community bank. We got great terms. They're just a really great local bank to work with there in Tacoma. We're excited to work with them again. So I just need to say that past outcomes may not necessarily indicate future results. This was an insane deal. We certainly aren't promising a 1 year cash out refi kind of situation, but I mean, this is a carbon copy of Nara Villa just down the street, and our plan is to do the exact same thing we did on that asset with this asset.
All right, so there's our pictures. All right, and then let's jump into kind of the meat of our presentation here, where we talk about, this is a fund model. So capital goes into the fund, and then we spend that on many different assets. So Nara Villa is the cornerstone of Fund 2. That's why we started there. But other assets will be acquired in Fund 2. We estimate about a third of the capital will go to Nara Villa, and then the other 2/3 will go to other assets. And so we think it's really important for everyone to understand how we think as a company when we're making decisions to spend investment dollars. Absolutely. And how we've modeled our fund to be completely different from anything in the industry. Our current investors know all about how it's different. We've done lots of one-on-one calls to explain those differences. And for those of you that are new, I hope you really enjoy hearing about how we think private equity should be structured with an investor first mindset. And we love investing in real estate. We love driving returns. We love property management. We love all of the things that we get to do on a daily basis. But when we think about our big lifetime goal, the things that we're thinking about as we're really wrapping up our career in, say, 40, 50 years, it's changing capitalism and changing private equity to be an investor first model.
Absolutely. So this is where we're kind of pivoting from talking about Nara Villa and the differences between Fund 1 and Fund 2 and the overall structure for Fund 2. So now's a good opportunity. If you have any questions about Nara Villa or differences between Fund 1 and Fund 2, now's a good time to throw those in there. One question that we did get that I think is a really salient question that is certainly on the tip of everyone's tongue is interest rates are going up, and so a lot of people have asked, is now a good time to invest? And if you've consumed a lot of our content, you'll know that we chuckle a little bit when we hear that question, because it doesn't matter when prices are going up. People say, oh, well, prices are going up. Are you sure you want to invest? And then if prices do start to go down because interest rates are going up, then people say, oh, are you sure now is a good time to invest? It's always a good time to invest.
Where's our sign here? Focus on the long term. That's I don't know if you guys can see that one over there. So, we're big believers in just making the best decision at any given day. We think of real estate as a yo-yo on an escalator. So there are minor ups and downs. That's the yo-yo, but there's a steady, consistent rise. That's the escalator.
Yeah.
Took that straight from Gary Keller, part of that personal mastermind.
Yeah. It's a good metaphor. Absolutely. Yeah. So we're excited about the term sheet that we're looking at for Nara Villa. Elaine and I, we just locked in $5 million of debt for a portfolio of single family homes a few weeks ago at 3.8%. I mean, at the very best, you know, in terms of where the debt market was, we're at 3.0%. So there just hasn't been a huge spread there yet, the way there has been with commercial mortgages, just the way, you know, Fed policy works, the way interest rate policy works. So we're still seeing like pretty reasonable interest rates in that market, and particularly with commercial banks. So interest rates with debt funds, those have gone up significantly. We don't typically work with those investment products. We just love working with local community banks, and there's just kind of less of a yo-yo effect with lending with those banks. So we know interest rates are going to go up, but at the end of the day, you know, we're projecting this rate of return. You know, if we hit, let's say, a 100% rate of return again, not saying we will, but if we did, like, the gap between a 3 and a 5% interest rate is nothing. It's a very small gap indeed. We're deep value add people, and we don't need to worry as much about those moves in interest rate because our margins are just so massive in comparison.
And I think it's also important to note that we've been investing for 12 years. And so we've invested through interest rate increases, interest rate decreases. There's certainly much more attention to interest rates right now because of what's happening with inflation and because there was such a long period with low interest rates through COVID. But it's important to remember that the Fed had planned to raise interest rates before COVID. Right now, there's just a lot more kind of hype about it. But in our years of investing, sometimes they go up, sometimes they go down, and the business plan just kind of keeps ticking on. Yep. OChem is asking a couple of questions there about management fees. Is it a long-term hold, that sort of thing? So hang with us. We're going to get into how our model is just completely different than everything else.
Yep. Lots of great questions. We'll make sure all questions get answered before the end of the webinar here.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about our core values. We are super excited about these banners. So we got these created for our live event that we're having in Rochester in July. And I think we're just going to have them up in our office all the time now. So we have like, I don't know, 6 or 8 little offices here. Nick and I share an office, and then offices for our team members. I think we're just going to put these in everyone's office to just consistently be reminding ourselves of our core values. Yeah. So our 7 core values are: grow authentically, focus on the long term, create infinite opportunity, show up for people, take extreme ownership, embody servant leadership, and radicalize transparency. And you're going to see in this presentation how those 7 core values have created our private equity model.
Yep. Yeah. So our values are literally going to drive our slide deck here, so to speak, and our values drive our day-to-day operation of our business. We believe in timeless principles, and they have changed very little in our entire investment career. We're always open to them changing, but they seem to be serving us well, and I don't think they're going to change much in the future.
Absolutely. So one of the things that we like to say is that we get the privilege every day to wake up and make the world a better place to live, really in the most tangible sense of the word. So creating living spaces for people and families, revitalizing communities. We're a property management focused organization that is so important to us. We really think property management is, far more important than asset management, even though that's really where kind of all the attention is. And we love that we get the opportunity to do this work, and that we get to lead an amazing, extremely elite team that does this every single day. So, we have big goals for changing property management and the leasing experience. We're going to do this through a $1 billion demonstration. So we talked about our goals of getting to $1 billion of assets under management. And we know that's just the beginning. We know that
we need to add another 0 on there. That 1 billion is coming up a little too quickly.
Yeah. To really achieve the goals that we have for ourselves, that we think, really moves the needle on housing in the country.
We want to change what it means to be a landlord or a tenant. So when those words are spoken today, I would say they can have a pejorative meaning. And we just don't think that's right. We don't think it's necessary for that to be the case. And we talked about how, incredibly sensitive we are to residents' needs when we're, repositioning an asset, redeveloping an asset. And we practice that same care, that same, dignity and respect in every aspect of our relationship with our tenants. And we think that if we just treat our tenants well, the people who are ultimately paying the bills here, the people who are ultimately generating the revenue, the people for whom we're creating this value, everything else is going to take care of itself. So, there's lots of great causes out there. We have a foundation, 5% of the, our profit from the fund goes to charity, and 5% goes to our staff. But, we get to literally make the world a better place to live. And that's something that has a lot of weight with us. And it's just never lost on us that it's a privilege that we get to do that.
Absolutely. We are big believers in servant leadership. So with our property management, we believe in a resident first philosophy, and in our capital raising, we believe in an investor first. And if those two things are in place, the rest just flows very naturally.
Yeah. We think, if you like this content, you can go take our course. 100% of the revenue from the course goes to charity. We jokingly call that the cookbook. Mm-hmm. So if you want to reproduce what we've done, great. If you somehow put us out of business with our own playbook, we would love that, because we think that our playbook makes the world a better place. And then if you read the cookbook and you're like, man, it seems like these people know what they're doing, I'd rather just go to the restaurant. Well, that's the private equity fund. So we have over 100 videos in our course. We go into exhaustive detail how we get lending and how we do our renovations and what finishes we use in our renovations. So we encourage you, if you are curious, go take the course, make whatever donation you can. It's a pay what you can model, trying to revolutionize that real estate education space. And we recommend that you check that out. And our goal is ultimately, when we're done, to give it all away. We'd love to create.
Well, I want to stop on our foundation first. Yeah. So we were able to make a donation of $30,000 to a local school just a few weeks ago for the creation of a playground. So our foundation, the Stoggenberg Family Foundation, which gets some of its income from our course and then some of its income from our share of our profits of our private equity fund, has three goals. So creating outdoor living spaces. You'll see at Garden Court West and Nara, we are huge proponents of people being outdoors and enjoying this great earth. And so that's one of our charitable missions. Creating affordable housing options. So we have this deep knowledge, this expertise, these connections, and really using that for the better of society. And then entrepreneurial education for young people. So, entrepreneurship has changed our lives, and we want to do that for as many people as possible. So we raised about $100,000 last year through Single Family at Scale into the Stoggenberg Family Foundation. And then we're starting to spend some of that this year at projects that just really speak to us. And we made a $30,000 donation just a few weeks ago. So thank you to all of you that have participated in Single Family at Scale. That playground is yours.
Mm-hmm. And we were able to, I think, inspire a larger capital campaign. How much total have they raised now for the playground?
I think a little under 80,000.
Yeah. So that's the really cool thing, is when you can make a big, contribution like that, you can inspire others to give as well. And that's when, I don't know, it makes me light up when, just talking about this stuff. We have such a privilege to be able to give and contribute like this. And our goal is, one day to give everything away, to create a fund one day that is dedicated. It's a for-profit entity that serves a nonprofit entity. How cool would it be to walk down Main Street and some of those buildings are serving exclusively a nonprofit mission? Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, let's talk about our track record. So we talked a little bit about it there at the top, but we'll go into more detail here. I see we're just a little under 12 million. So lots of capital is coming in, as likely as we talk about Nara and share the vision and the success plan there.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's really common in the private equity space or syndication space for people to try to appear to be bigger than they are, or that they have been in the business longer than they have been, or I don't know what, someone might own 1% of 10,000 doors and they talk about how they own 10,000 doors. We have always focused on growing very authentically. So not growing too quickly, growing in the right ways at the right times when, the opportunity presented itself. For example, we had 10, 15, and $20 million on our wait list for Fund 2. And we obviously could have raised that fund at any time in the last 6 months. But in Q1 of 2022, pricing was high, and we knew that pricing was going to come down when interest rates started coming up. And so we were not excited about the pricing we were seeing on opportunities. Mm-hmm. We were writing offers, but none of them were getting accepted. And so we said, if we're not getting the kind of value that we want to get in Fund 1, there's no point in us raising Fund 2. And I think a lot of groups, because they collect fees on that capital that they raise, and because they don't necessarily value growing authentically, maybe they would have raised that capital. I'm so glad we waited. I feel like just
every day we had to tell people like, no, we don't have a fund open.
Yeah, it was unreal. And I think we made the right decision. I mean, I know we made the right decision, and then the stars have aligned perfectly with Nara Villa, and we're finally starting to see some inventory in the marketplace. I'm very excited about the opportunities that are going to be available here to deploy the capital for funds too. But we have over 10 years of investment experience in real estate investment, over 500 doors, over 600 now. These are always moving targets here, over 200 million in assets under management. I think we've done more than one eviction now, but it's an extraordinarily small number. And the craziest thing is, I think pretty much all those evictions were related to COVID relief. So unfortunately, people would get like COVID relief and then just get stuck in a habit where they didn't pay rent or something like that. It was just a really unfortunate situation. If it wasn't for COVID, I wonder if we would have done any evictions. Never lost money on a deal, never failed to make a payment to an investor. We target a 5-year time period to return capital, but historically we've done that in a much shorter time frame, 2 to 3 years, frequently less than 2 years. And again, that disclaimer that past outcomes are not necessarily indicative of future results. They're probably the best predictor, but absolutely every investment is different. Every return is different.
Absolutely. Let's talk about our specific model. This is probably what the new people are wondering, kind of how is this different? So we target an indefinite hold period, which is very different than a typical, like let's say a 5-year time period, just for simplicity's sake. So where a typical plan might be to acquire an asset and paint a bunch of things and do some light value add, and then sell it at say year 5 and then return capital, and then you're kind of moved on from that deal. Our chief metric is payback period. So we work really hard to find deals where we can acquire the asset, do renovations, increase the value of the asset. And we also increase the value through strategic management. We've talked a lot about how we're so property management focused. Do a cash out refi to return capital to investors. And then everyone stays in the deal for as long as possible. So it's an infinite hold period. And a lot of people, say, well, I don't want my money in the deal for, 20 years. Your money won't be in the deal that long. We tell people to plan for a 5-year time frame. Historically, it's been shorter than that. And then you'll have all of your money back, but then you continue to have your ownership stake in the fund for probably about 20 or 25 years. Just kind of thinking of our ages and those sorts of things, we anticipate that each fund might be open for about 20 or 25 years. And so all along, you're getting your quarterly distributions. As there are future cash out refi events, you're getting your share of the equity that's generated. And then at the very end, when everything is sold and liquidated, you would get your share of the equity there. I find that this model is, once it clicks for someone, they're like, you can hear it in their voice, or if you're with them in person, you can see it of like, wow, wow. Oh, okay. I get it now. There can be a little bit of a learning curve because it's so different. It does not target a sale. We don't look at things like IRR. We don't do light value add. We focus on that long-term. And we strive for that infinite rate of return for as long as possible.
Yeah. I'll have a call with someone and they're like, I've done my own projection. It seems like your returns aren't that great. I'm like, okay, well, what did you do with the capital after we returned it to you? And they're like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, you got the money back. So what did you do with the money after that? Did you put that into another investment? And they're like, oh, so I'm like getting a return here, but then I also, oh, wow. Oh, okay, sure. So how do I move forward with this again?
Right.
And it's usually like a moment, clicks when people realize how kind of crazy the potential returns are with this business model, and how incomparable it is to let's say a 5-year hold period. The SEC is also a big fan of this business model. So most private equity funds, most syndication structures, they target a 5-year hold period, and that's on purpose because the SEC does not like for funds or syndications to run for long periods of time, because they could potentially become a Ponzi scheme where you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. Maybe your distributions are from investor contributions. We're able to have an indefinite hold period because we don't take any money out of the front end of the deal. We don't have any fees or splits. 100% of the profit from the fund goes to the capital partners until they get a full return of capital. We return that capital early in the deal, and then and only then do we participate in the upside from the deal. So from an SEC perspective, like it's impossible to have a Ponzi scheme if you've already returned all your capital to your investors. So that makes this vehicle really, really safe for two reasons. So first of all, let's say hypothetically you got a full return of capital, 4 years from now, and in year 5, the bottom falls out of the real estate market. Real estate loses half of its value. The sky is falling, whatever. If you're in a typical fund or real estate syndication, they have an obligation to sell. You can ask the SEC for like a 1-year extension, but there have to be like extenuating circumstances for it. Well, we can just hold that asset. And 10 years from now, when we still hold that asset, we're going to be glad that we did. Whereas in a typical like fund or syndication, like you could easily realize a loss. And again, in our business model, you've already gotten your money back. So if there's a dip in real estate values, like who cares? You're already in infinite rate of return. So the end outcome there is that it's pretty difficult to lose money with this strategy. It's absolutely possible. There's risk involved in any investment. So let me throw that disclaimer out there boldly. But I hope, just if you just think through that, the fact that there's no money coming out of the deal on the front end of the deal, 100% of the profit is going to a capital return, until all capital is returned. And because of that, we're able to target an indefinite hold period. We don't have to have a hard exit the way most funds and syndications do. This is just an extraordinarily safe play. And then the long-term, rates of return get kind of ridiculous, frankly, as time goes on and you start compounding that infinite rate of return.
Absolutely. And so, to put real numbers on it, in Q1 of 2022 for Fund 1, we waived $787,000 of fees. So that would have been our acquisition fee for the Nicholas and Oliver apartments, a full recourse loan fee, an asset management fee. That's a big number. And one of the questions that came earlier is, I'm used to sponsors with fees. Why don't you guys do fees? And I hope when you hear that number, you think, if the people that I'm investing with are collecting almost $1 million in 1 quarter from fees, are they really real estate investors or are they fund managers, right? Because you have to think about, incentives and how people are compensated, leads to incentives. So we're big believers that if we're asking you, our investors, to profit from real estate and to invest in real estate, that's the only way we profit as well. So we don't have kind of this side gig where we're collecting fees and then, distributing profit distributing profit from real estate. We all only profit from the real estate returns together. Right. And all of your capital is returned before we share in any profit whatsoever. So you can kind of think of it as like a 100 pref and then a 50-50 split after that. That's not technically how it works, but that's kind of something that when people hear that, they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And it's a big believer in aligning incentives and, not just aligning incentives, but really putting the needs of our investors first. It's what we think is the right thing to do. And clearly the people have spoken because we raised, over $10 million in one night for Fund 1. We're rapidly raising Fund 2, tons of repeat investors over the years. Prior to our funds, it's important to note that we've done many joint ventures. So we've used this business model not only with our own real estate, but with many smaller joint ventures over and over and over, and then went to the fund model so that we could serve even more investors. And people love it. And our hope is that, all of you are going to the other people that you're, considering investing with and asking, well, how much have you collected in fees and why do you do that? And how does that, change your behavior? And how does that make it so that perhaps your behavior is not in my best interest? And so, I hope
let's think about that. So if you're working with a syndicator or a fund manager who actually makes more money in fees than they do from equity splits, there's a disalignment of interest, and that's where you can get into risky territory. So, I mentioned how we had, 10 and 15 and $20 million in the Funds 2 wait list, and we declined to open Funds 2 because we didn't like the market conditions. We didn't like the pricing that we were seeing on assets. We knew that pricing might be more favorable in the future. And because we don't collect any fees for raising money and buying assets and stuff, we had zero financial incentive to raise that fund just because we could. Now, if we did collect a bunch of fees, there's a good chance we would have raised that fund just so we could collect those fees. So you have to think really carefully about how those incentive schemes affect people's behavior. People are going to behave in a way in alignment with those incentives. And you can think about that from a negative perspective, but you can also think about that from a positive perspective. If we can only make money when you make money, we're really incentivized to make sure that you make money. There is no way for us to profit from this fund in a way that does not result in our partners profiting from this fund. So there's just the ultimate alignment of incentives. And to answer that question very directly of why do we waive all these fees? Why do we do it this way? We've got big goals here, and we just raised our $10 million fund. We're raising our $30 million fund. Maybe our next fund will be a $100 million fund. We'll see. Who cares about, some piddly fees on a $10 million fund? We want to deliver insane returns to our investors that make them our raving fans. So they tell their friends and come back and invest more capital. And we've got, maybe one day we'll have $1 billion fund, and we'll be really glad that we, forewent some, minor compensation on the front end of this deal. So we're very much playing the long game here. Amazon didn't make any profit for a decade. I think it worked out pretty well for Amazon. This is a business model that is very common in the technology space, maybe not as much in the real estate space, but we're very happy to, live on the existing assets that we already own. We were, financially free before we started doing, our private equity fund model. And that gives us I'd say the luxury of being able to waive that compensation on the front end of the deal.
Yeah, that's something I want to speak to that I just recently have started thinking about. So someone who is a fund manager asked me, well, how do you and Nick do it? How do you, provide for your family? And I say, well, we were financially free from our own real estate investing for many years. And that allows us to, essentially work for free with our asset management company with Fund 1, Fund 2, Fund 3 in the future, because, our needs are covered through our real estate investing. And that's really when it clicked to me that if a person is raising capital and they have to have fees in order to quote unquote keep the lights on, and they're not already financially independent, what business do they have raising capital to tell people that they will make you financially independent, right? Yeah. Like, one should only say that they can confidently make someone else financially independent after they are already financially independent. And so, I think I would encourage people to think about that, to think about if someone says they have to collect fees to have income, that means that they haven't already reached the level of success from real estate investing that I think they should have to then be a steward of other people's capital.
Yep, absolutely. There's a question, why was this model chosen? This is the model that we've used to build all the wealth that we've created in our entire life. So we were doing the Burr business model before it had a name, I guess. And we just did it over and over and over and over again. It was just something that kind of intuitively, we stumbled upon over time and with just trial and error. And then we started working with investors, and the business model has never changed. And I don't really see that business model changing ever. And then, we think it's very spiritually rewarding. We're a big fan of the book, Crushing It in Commercial Real Estate, written by Brian Murray. Brian's a member of that mastermind that we're a member of, by the way. So it's kind of cool getting to just hang out with these people that, I don't know, he's like a small hero of mine or something. And his opinion is, if you really love on an asset, if you really make it amazing for you and your management company and your business model, the market will never value it as much as you will. The market will never value it as much as you will. So to a certain extent, we make these assets so nice that we kind of have to keep them, because we can't sell them for what they're worth to us. And then the IRS really loves this business model as well. The IRS subsidizes people who provide affordable market rate long-term housing. That's a huge need. The IRS subsidizes food and shelter. So we might grow some corn while we're at it too. But
fun fact, that was Nick's first foray into entrepreneurship. So we live in Minnesota, land of lots of cornfields. And
not hypothetical.
When Nick was a high school and a college young man, he drove around and would have, those corn stands that are like near stop signs and stuff.
Once you've negotiated over a nickel for an ear of corn with some, grizzled, Great Depression survivor type person, negotiating a $20 million real estate deal is a walk in the park. So learned everything I knew, about entrepreneurship from the back of a pickup there. I can't even remember what I was talking about now.
We're talking about how the IRS loves this model. Yep.
So most funds and syndications, again, because they have all these fees and splits, they have to have a hard exit. The SEC requires them to have a hard exit. And so you can participate in some of the tax advantages of real estate, getting depreciation and so forth, but then you have to recapture that as soon as they exit, and they'll frequently exit, in 2 years instead of 5 to maximize their fee income. Frankly, they get fees when the deal is bought, when the deal is sold. So they're incentivized to churn, to transact that asset. The IRS doesn't like that. It really penalizes that. So our business model really leans into the most favorable tax treatment you can possibly get in the real estate investing paradigm. So those are reasons why we have this structure for the fund.
And it just, as someone who has never sold anything, I guess I just don't understand why someone would sell something and then not own it. Why wouldn't you just get the money and then keep owning it and then buy the next thing? So, a question Nick and I get frequently is, how do you guys own $40 million of real estate? You guys aren't even 40 yet. Well, now you know the answer. So if you take the same bucket of money and you spend it over and over and over, you can run up the total value of assets quite a bit. And then you have 40 million of assets that's generating cash flow, debt pay down, appreciation. All of that depreciation continues to be deferred for a long, long, long time. We haven't paid income tax in many, many years. And, we have a huge bucket of depreciation that we just don't worry about because we don't have any plan for selling. And, that's how we got there. So, and now we're helping other people get there so that, someone can put money into one of the investments, get that money out, potentially go into the next investment, and then they're getting return from both of those. And it wouldn't take many investments, 4, maybe 5, to really get someone well on their way to financial independence. And I would project that someone could do that in probably 10 to 15 years of kind of rolling their capital from one investment to the next. That's about how long it took us with our model. And for us, it's like there's no other way.
And again, someone will look at like a projection or put together some sort of calculation, and they're like, well, the returns could be higher. I'm like, well, what did you do with your capital that you got back? And if you put that capital into the next round of the fund, which we'll make sure there's an opportunity available to you when we, give you a big check, give you your cash back. The exponential growth opportunity here is off the charts. You could easily hit like a 5x equity multiple over, a 15-year period. Just incredible growth possible with this business model.
Absolutely.
The property management model. So that's another very unique thing about what we do. So most property management companies, most apartment buildings, the way they're operated is there's on-site management, and that site management, the HR and payroll and everything is billed back to the asset as an expense to the asset. And then the property management company charges a fee on top of that. So you might hear there's like a 2 or 4% management fee or something like that, a really low management fee. Well, that fee is pure overhead in addition to every expense that goes into operating that property. So there will be like a fraction of a cell phone bill on there. There will be a fraction of the postage expense from the main office of the property management company. There will be a charitable giving, allocation for the fraction of, the charitable giving the property management company engaged in that year that's allocated to the apartment complex. And it's problematic for 2 reasons. So first of all, it constitutes a disalignment of incentives. The property management company can make money even when the asset's not making money. And we frequently purchase assets that are in that situation where the property management company is making money, but the asset is not. It is running a loss because all of your expenses are being billed back to the asset. I mean, you can't lose money if you have no expenses, right? And then the second problem is it dilutes incentives. So with that model, let's say a fraction of each of my employees' cell phone bills being charged back to individual assets, I don't have much of an incentive to call the cell phone company and say, hey, why is my bill so high? What can we do to reduce our bill? So we have an all-in model for our property management fee. So we shoulder 100% of the operational expenses related to our staff and legal and postage and cell phone and vehicle mileage and all these sorts of things. And we collect just an all-in 10% for the assets that we manage. That's how Nara Villa works as well. So that radically reduces the total expense ratio on the asset and the total management charges and keeps incentives laser aligned. That management company wants to raise rents as much as they can, because if you don't, you're not going to have a very healthy margin. Again, with the model where you charge back all your expenses, who cares what the rents are? You still get your 2% fee or whatever, and that's pure profit regardless of what expenses you're running. But with our model, we have to keep expenses low and we have to keep revenue high in order for our property management company to actually make a profit. And we charge a discounted rate to our fund. So the retail rate, we would have fees associated with managing renovation projects. There'd be leasing commissions for placing new tenants, fees associated with regulatory compliance, like getting a rental certificate. We waive all of those fees, and we just have a 10% all-in model for assets that are managed by the fund.
Yep, absolutely. I think it's important to know that, Nick and I started managing our own assets. So our first single family homes, we managed them ourselves. And when we got to where, we just simply couldn't do that anymore, there was just always, a phone call that needed to be made, a property that needed to be leased. We had a big decision to make of, would we hire third-party property management, or would we create a property management company? And we found that it is just so critical that the property management company have an ownership mindset, and really, again, is only profiting from the real estate investment itself, that we created our own property management company. That's how important it is to us. So we spend, probably half of our time, running our property management company, and then the other half focused on growth and acquisitions and debt and meeting with investors. That's how important property management is to us. And it drives consistency and quality and alignment of interests.
Yeah. So we spent a lot of time on this slide, but it's critical to understand that this fund is very different from 99% of the other real estate private equity funds or syndications that are out there. And we've been incredibly conscious about the way we've architected this fund, because we think that it's just a better way to do business. It's a better way for investors that puts their needs ahead of our own. And we're really excited about hopefully putting our dig in capitalism and changing private equity in some small or big way.
Absolutely. One of the questions that was asked that we'll address here is, with a 5-year commitment, if there is an emergency, is there a provision for exit? So we'll address that first. So let's assume that no capital has been returned yet. So someone has put $100,000 into the fund, no capital has been returned, and then that person would like to liquidate. So first of all, I really encourage everyone to think of this as an illiquid investment. This is very different than having $100,000 in your bank account or a stock account. Think of it as illiquid. That being said, emergencies do happen. So at that point, before any capital is returned, theoretically, someone should be able to sell their shares just dollar for dollar. So you could approach Nick and I to purchase your shares, any other investors in the fund. There was such a staggering wait list for Fund 1. People were asking us, like, can you call someone and ask them to sell me their shares? And we're like, nope, we're not doing that. But you could approach other investors in the fund. And theoretically, you could sell your shares to any other accredited investor, since this is a 506c. After your capital has been returned, there really should be no reason why anyone would ever want to leave the fund. We know that that's a common question, because we get it a lot, and it's really, quite transparently kind of baffling to us.
It tells us that we're not doing a very good job of communicating how advantageous this business model is. Once you've gotten a return of capital and you're still in the deal, getting out of the deal would be really disadvantageous, because you'd have a huge recapture event associated with that. So a huge portion of your proceeds would actually just go straight to the IRS. When we've set up this vehicle, like with our attorneys, we had to tell them 10 different times. They're like, okay, so when do you, when do the investors exit? No, they stay in the deal. Okay, right, but when do they exit? No, they stay in the deal. And they're like, well, why would you let them stay in the deal the whole time? And we're like, well, that's how we want to put this together. And they just thought it was such a favorable deal for our investors that surely we were miscommunicating in some way, shape, or form. And then we're similarly baffled when investors ask us, well, how do I get out? And it's like, well, why would you want to get out of infinite returns?
Right. So it's really important to note that after your capital has been returned, you have $0 in the deal. Yeah. So you or your heirs or whoever will just get quarterly distributions for a few decades. So, there are provisions in the operating agreement that someone could use to get out at that point. I think that's where, Nick and I kind of draw the line of, it would be so hard for us to describe to someone how that would be done. Someone would have to theoretically have all of the assets appraised and then make a decision as to, how many years are there left of this infinite return fund. just think of it as once your money's back, you're getting infinite returns for a few decades. And that's it. Yeah. I want to spend time on this because it's a common question that we get. One thing that we offer is we do one-on-one calls. Rachel or Riley or Mark will put the Calendly link. That's something we've always done, not just when we have a fund launch. Our calendars are generally always open to meet with investors. So if that's a question that you have that we just kind of haven't quite clicked for you, schedule a call and we're happy to kind of walk through. Again, I think when people really get it, there's this moment when they're like, wow. So like I have Abram is 0 years old, right? So you will be getting distributions when he is a legal driver. You'll be getting distributions when he's a legal voter. You'll be getting distributions when he can drink his first alcoholic beverage. And they're like, wow, wow, that makes so much sense now. Yeah, I can see why, there would be no exit after all of capital is returned. Let's talk about the call option. Lori asked that question. We'll talk about that here. The call option was really created because of this question here. So many people ask about, well, how do I get out after my capital's returned? That we had to create a mechanism to kind of solve that problem. And it's kind of a clunky mechanism. So I'm honestly not sure it really clarifies things for people, but let's explain it.
Yeah, it also helps us from an SEC perspective. So the SEC doesn't really like funds that have an indefinite hold period because, again, they could potentially become Ponzi schemes. In our case, we're able to do that because we return capital so aggressively to our investors that it's kind of impossible we could do that. But the SEC really likes the idea that there's a unilateral call option. So basically, after 15 years in the fund, theoretically, we could exercise an option where the investors are removed from the fund and the fund is done. So the SEC is happy that at this point, it's just an optional thing if the fund is still going 30 years from now. We also found it very helpful with investors who are kind of hung up on the idea of, okay, how do I get out, so to speak? So after 15 years, we have a minimum hurdle of a 15% total annualized rate of return during the time your capital was in the deal. So hopefully your capital has only been in the deal for a few years, but kind of an insane hurdle. So if you think a lot of other funds have, let's say, a 6 or maybe a 7% preferred rate of return, we have a 15% preferred rate of return essentially to meet that minimum hurdle for that call option. And at that point, theoretically, investors would be removed from the deal and the fund would be dissolved. Now, we don't plan on exercising that call option, but hopefully it gives investors a warm fuzzy. It certainly gives the SEC a warm fuzzy. And then if the asset is sold or we convert to a REIT and ride off into the sunset or something like that, before that call option is exercised, it would never come into play also. So we are, making the regulators very happy by having that option there, and also making some of our investors happy, because all you have to do if this model is kind of confusing to you, all you have to know is that you have a guaranteed, or not guaranteed, that's not the right word, but you have a minimum 15% total annualized rate of return that you would hit in this deal while you have capital in the deal. So just kind of almost a farcical, high number that would potentially need to be hit. And that's the strength of the opportunity that we're offering. I've never heard of anyone offering a preferred rate of return anywhere near this level, but that's the level that we offer.
Yep. People ask, why is that a unilateral call option? So because we intend to hold these assets long-term, we can't have an option where investors ask to be liquidated out of the fund. So what would happen is someone might come to us and say, 10 years and say, I'd like to come out of the fund. And we would do this whole explanation again of why that's not a good decision, why you have, say 10 or 15 more years of infinite return coming. It's so hard to value all of the assets, value someone's stake in the fund. But if someone just said, I absolutely have to come out of the fund, it's unilateral because we would, essentially agree to that decision. So we couldn't be forced to make that decision. And that's for the protection of everyone else in the fund. But if someone just really insisted on coming out, a mechanism at which we could buy their shares out would be that we would buy those shares at a 15% annualized rate of return for the years that their capital was in the fund. Yep. So I hope that makes sense. And if it doesn't, schedule a one-on-one call.
Yeah, that's a little deep into the weeds, but we're here to answer every single question that people can ask. From a super high level perspective, you can really think of it this way. Elaine and I cannot make money at this until you've gotten all your money back and you're in an infinite rate of return. We don't have any fees. We don't have any splits. So as just a rational human being, you should know that If our asset level performance was the same as some other, fund manager or syndicator or whatever, if you're trying to compare opportunities, you're going to get a higher rate of return with this opportunity because that money is not coming out of the deal on the front end of the deal. And it's going to make the deal much safer as well, in addition to driving returns. And you can kind of just stop there. There's no, real additional complexity or calculation you need to make. We're happy to, go through a pro forma. We're happy to talk about the call option or any aspect of the PPM you want to talk about. But from a high level, you can kind of just know that you are getting all of the money from the deal until you've gotten the money back, and we don't get anything. There's no fees, no splits. So it doesn't get any better than that. That's as good as it can possibly get from a conceptual basis.
Absolutely. And then the final question that was asked in that little chunk of questions is what percentage ownership does 100,000 buy? So 100,000 divided by 30 million.
Yeah. So you get like a 0.2% ownership stake of all assets that are in the fund. Yeah.
Good question. Okay. And then, we mentioned that 5% of our profits, so nothing to do with the investor profits, but 5% of our profits go to our team. We really believe in the idea that a rising tide raises all boats, and, fairly compensating the people who are growing our company alongside us. And then we want our people to walk into buildings and know that they too own, a small portion of that building, and have that ownership mentality of, I'm going to pick up that piece of trash, and I'm going to smile at that resident, even though I'm having a really tough day, and I'm going to take that phone call at 10 after 5 when I really want to get home. So it's really important to us. We celebrated with our team today that 5% of the profits from the fund will go to them. And then 5% go to our charity.
There's a really basic question. I want to get that one. What will the rate of return that you project for 15 to 20 years after principal is returned? So if we don't hit like a 15% total annualized rate of return over the life of the fund, I would be disappointed with that outcome. So a fairly healthy rate of return, and then all the other advantages that this unique fund structure has are just heaped on top of that.
I'm looking for our.
That's it there.
Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna jump ahead a little bit in the presentation here to talk about infinite opportunity. So it's one of our core values: create infinite opportunity, and an infinite rate of return model has been our business model for 12 years. Someone asked, "Were you investing in 2008, 2012?" The answer to that is yes, and the answer to that is, this is where that model came from. So our very first investment, we were kind of that typical accidental landlord. I owned a home, Nick owned a home. We got married. His home was nicer. We moved into his home, and the rest is history. Here we are today, 4 beautiful children.
It's your story to tell, not mine.
I was just reminiscing on how happy I am to be married to you. I'm a very lucky woman.
I'm happy to be married to you too.
Thank you. So I wanted to sell that home very transparently. I share that I was that kind of reluctant personality of I didn't want to have that home. And that didn't make sense in that economic climate. So we were probably about $35,000 underwater in that home. And at that time, that was a large portion of all of the wealth we had ever created. And so Nick said, I don't think a resident could cause $35,000 of damage. I think we should rent it out. And I was like, well, you're right about a lot of things. You married me, so you're good, make good decisions. So let's rent that home out. And we did, and it generated cash flow, generated debt pay down. We still own that property to this day. And not only has it, reached the value that we purchased it, but we're, probably sitting on over $100,000 of equity in that single family home. And that's where this model came from. So not only can you use the same bucket of money to buy asset after asset after asset and get the return from all of those assets, but it weathers storms really well. Because if you don't have to sell, we acquire assets that generate cash flow from the beginning. So there's always that margin of safety. People that come to our community hours and the things that we do know that we really think about cash flow as a major margin of safety, so that if the value goes down, to some extent, it doesn't matter, right? You're still generating cash flow and you just ride that out. Real estate will go up and down. There's no doubt about that. In a 25-year, fund period, there will be ups, there will be downs. Most of that's just spreadsheet math. So our main target is getting money back to our investors as quickly as possible, having cash flow all along the way. And then there's going to be years where the value of those assets go down, and that's going to be a storm to weather, but everyone will have their capital out of the deal. And if that happens before capital comes out of the deal, there will be cash flow that's distributed. And then, the reason we say like a 20 or a 25 year, we don't say, well, we're going to liquidate this thing in 2042 is, what if 2042 is a tough year, right? That would be really silly to do this whole thing for 20 years and then sell during a down year. So we plan for about 20 to 25 years. And in that window, we're going to look for the best year, the strongest year. Maybe it's longer. Maybe it's 27. We make no commitment to any specific year. In a perfect world, this fund would exist for 1,000 years, because we're all getting capital back in that first, say, 3 to 5 year period. And then you'd have 995 years of infinite return. But as of right now, humans are mortal. So, we talk about like 20 to 25 years, but maybe year 19 is a really strong year of real estate. And that's when it makes sense to liquidate. But the question was, did we invest through 2008, 2012? We did. We acquired many of our first assets there. Nick said in the beginning, there's kind of this drumbeat of, well, prices are rising, you shouldn't invest. And we just keep investing all along. And then there's also this drumbeat of, maybe there's a little danger ahead, so I'm not going to invest. So there's always a reason not to invest. There's always a reason to invest if you have a long-term hold plan in mind. And we're just excited about the possibility that, there could be a phase of our investing career when prices are lower, competition's a little thinner, and we're going to scoop up as many assets as we possibly can. I don't see that coming for, a couple of years yet with real estate. No one has a crystal ball, but downturns excite me because they're an opportunity to grow.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you pulled up the slide to talk through just a hypothetical scenario. Here's how you make money in this fund. So you get 100% of the profit from the deal until you get a full return of capital. So hopefully that's a straightforward bullet point to understand. We project less than 5 years to return capital. Historically, we've always done this in less than 3 years, and sometimes as little as 1 year. So implicitly, hopefully it makes sense to you that if we return capital in a single year, we've generated a 100% rate of return in that time frame. We probably had to double our money in order to successfully get a cash out refi. If we did like a 20% down loan to buy it, and then a 20% down loan to refi or whatever, we had to double our money, and we did that in 1 year. So you've hit like a 50% total annualized rate of return in that year one, and then it's an infinite rate of return thereafter. Like this is a right off into the sunset, out of the park home run kind of success. And then if it took us 2 years, you'd get like a 25% total annualized rate of return. If it was 3 years, it would be like a 13% total annualized rate of return. So it's relatively easy math to do there. And that's just for year one. That's just for year one. And then it's an infinite rate of return thereafter. And then you have your money out of the deal and you can go invest in another deal. And so you have to make sure you're including that return of capital in your math in order to appreciate just how exponential these returns can be. Once you get to that infinite rate of return period, that's when our splits kick in. That's when we get 50% of the profit there. We would expect that you might get somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 20% of your investment amount in net annual profit. So I mentioned a 15% total annualized rate of return over the life of the asset. It would be, if we hit a target lower than that, I would be disappointed. So you can just kind of pencil that in. You get that through cash flow, debt pay down, and appreciation. It's relatively easy for us to predict when we're going to hit our payback period. So when we're buying like Tenarville apartments, we know that we're going to be able to do these renovations. We're going to be able to make it way more valuable. We're going to be able to hit this cash out refi after that. Beyond that, it gets a little more fuzzy. So we're in our infinite returns. So to a certain extent, we don't care what the returns are. They're infinite. We've gotten all of our money out of the deal. There's no risk in the deal. And the deal is just going to throw off cash, for here until the end of time. But we don't know, are rents going to organically grow, 20% like they have in the past year, or are they going to organically grow, 3%? Another piece of this is all these projections that we're doing are year one projections. So this is a critical thing. We probably shoot ourselves in the foot here by being overly conservative. But most of the projections that you see out there look at what's called like a 5-year discounted cash flow analysis. And they have certain economic assumptions that they pencil in there. So they might look at the last 3 years and see, on average, there's been 13% organic rent growth or something like that. So we'll pencil in 13% organic rent growth into our 5-year projection. And all your numbers look amazing when the rents just go up 13% year over year over year over year. And it can get it's very easy to make the numbers look really good if they're not really in reality mediocre. So year one is almost always your worst year because you're placing that asset into service. And the numbers I think are the most understandable when you look at year one. If you're successful in year one, you're going to be really successful in year two and year three. And here's an example of that. So let's say hypothetically you invested in the deal and you got,
do the next slide?
Yeah.
Okay. Here we go.
Yeah. So let's say that you invest in the deal and you get that 1 million back in the next 3 years. Well, if there's just like a 3.5% organic, rent growth during that time period, you'd get like 1.1 million back, not 1 million. So just 3% per year adds up to 10%. And that's the way cap rates work and NOI works and stuff. So I can promise you, you'd get an additional 1.1 million back, not 1 million back. And we're not factoring that into this analysis. So we probably handicap ourselves. Maybe our returns look a little lackluster or just don't look as kind of off the charts amazing as they otherwise would because we are just so conservative in our projection. And I don't want to be, I think a discounted cash flow analysis is a very legitimate way to do it. It's the most, kind of technically correct way to do it. But I don't think that anyone truly understands how they work and how they project out, time value of money into the future and have these assumptions that can can inflate your numbers a little bit. So in this scenario, you'd get you put in $1 million today, you get that $1 million back within the next 3 years, some cash flow in the first couple of years, not much, but some. And then we get to a big cash out refi on Nara Villa and other assets that are put into the fund. After you've gotten that cash out refi, you might get, let's say, $50K per year back in cash flow from years 4 to 8. And then in year 8, you get like a $500,000 bolus of cash from our subsequent cash out refi. And again, this is in year one dollars. So if you had that very modest, we'll say 3.5%, rent growth or whatever, that $500K bolus is probably going to be more like $600K. But again, we're just doing year one dollars here. So my suspicion is people aren't going to really understand how incredibly amazing this opportunity is until right around year 8, when they're just like, why the heck did I just get a check for $500,000? I got my money out of this thing 5 years ago. What the heck is this for?
One of the things that Nick and I do, when we take calls and we're explaining infinite rate of return to people is, we'll say, one day we're going to get these, we're going to have a phone call and it's going to be like, hi, is this Elaine? Yep, it is. How can I help you? Or what would you like to talk about? My name's Jane and I'm just still getting checks from you. And I just wanted to make sure that you didn't like forget to turn it off or something. And I'll be like, nope. What fund are you in? Let me look you up. Oh, Jane,
Fund 17.
I see you're in fund 1 and yep, you're supposed to be getting returns from us. We returned all of your capital in 2024 or 2025 or whatever. We raised fund 1 in 2021. And yep, it's 2035 and you are supposed to be getting those checks. And that's when this business model will catch fire. And that's when people will really get it. And, we get a head start, with everyone because we know that business model because we've lived it with our own real estate portfolio. So we've had many, refi events in our own portfolio where we've pulled 7 figures of liquidity out of our portfolio. And then we've used that to buy the next round of real estate. And that magical moment, we try to explain it as best we can, but when someone experiences it firsthand, that's when an infinite rate of return really clicks.
Yep. All right. Well, I think we've hammered on that as hard as we can. Hopefully that resonates with everyone. That makes sense to everyone. Let's
Well, one of the questions here that was just dropped in is the plan to do repeated episodes of refinance, like let's say every 5 years over the lifetime of fund 2? Yes. So, for all of our assets, we're looking at how much equity is in that property and then harvesting that equity to take it out to buy more real estate. So that first round of harvesting equity is to get your original investment back to you. And then future harvests are to just, drive up your total overall return. And then at the very end, when everything is sold and liquidated, then investors would get their share of the equity. And we only go, typically to like a 75 or an 80% LTV. So, people ask about, are you worried about being over levered or those sorts of things? So that happened in, 2008, 2009, because people were doing 100% LTV, 105, 110% LTV. We only go up to an 80% max. When I checked most recently across our entire portfolio of everything we manage, I think we were at like 65 or 63%. Do you remember that day?
Those numbers sound about right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we're constantly building equity, and then there's, a harvest event at some different properties, and then, equity goes down as that equity gets distributed in liquidity, and then that goes back up over and over and over.
Yep. Yeah, just as a personal example, so we just did a cash out refi on a portfolio of single family homes.
I'll go forward to that slide.
Less than a month ago. So we already had no money in any of these homes. And we did
this is our personal portfolio of single family homes that we've built over the last 10 years.
Yeah, this is like 25 of those homes in one tranche of financing in a large commercial note. So we already had no money in those homes. And then we did a cash out refi 18 months ago or something like that.
It was July of 2020.
Okay, so close to 2 years ago. And we got a $1 million check at closing from that refi event. So that check by itself exceeded all the cash flow we'd ever received on our whole portfolio combined ever. But we just literally walked away with a $1 million check at closing. No tax that we have to pay on that because those proceeds are backed by debt. So the IRS does not see that as a capital gain. And we didn't have to sell the asset. So the asset kept cash flowing, kept appreciating. And then we got to refinance those exact same properties again here less than a month ago. We got another $1 million check at closing. In fact, we even got an extra house. They said, you have too much collateral here, so we're going to return one. So here's a check for $1 million, and here's a house back that you can go leverage elsewhere. So that's the power of this business model, and it takes a few years to get there. It takes a few years to do the rehab, to get it stabilized, and then obviously we've enjoyed some exaggerated appreciation here the last few years. But that's the magic moment that we can't wait to share with our investors.
Absolutely. So let's go back to kind of where we were in the presentation, just to make sure we cover everything. I think we were here. So our investment thesis, we are big believers in Warren Buffett style investing. So that, that's to a large extent where our long-term hold period came from. It's also where our idea of giving away all of our wealth in our lifetime came from. Just taking really great ideas and applying them to our own life. So we believe in buying high quality assets that we're proud to own, we're proud to manage in good markets, in good locations. So we look for things like new schools, new parks, new shopping areas, really having that local knowledge to drive investment decisions in a way that only a local will know, right? To know, well, that's the good street and that's the part that's, maybe not so great, or that's where the new school's going, or city council just approved a new project over there. So homes that we're proud to own for decades, taking amazing care of them, doing deep value add, new kitchens, new bathrooms, siding, furnaces, everything that something needs to stand the test of time. So not just putting lipstick on something and selling it kind of as soon as that lipstick wears off, taking great care of the people. Nick spoke to it that, we know that it's the residents in these properties that are paying rents, that's paying the bills, that's generating profit for all of us, and really putting them first. So having a property management thesis that's resident first. We've talked a lot about our indefinite hold period over the last 15 or 20 minutes here, and then what that does is it increases the velocity of capital. So that's a fancy way of saying taking a bucket of money, spending it on an investment, getting that money out of the investment, continuing to hold that first investment and generate return from that, and then buying the next investment. And the faster you can do that, the faster you can drive up your overall return over the entire portfolio, right? So you get some return from investment 1, 2, 3, and before you know it, you have 5 investments with the same bucket of money. You have the bucket of money sitting back in your bank account, and you've sped up the velocity of that capital to drive total returns as much as possible. And that's really it. It's really that simple. It's a business model we've loved for over 10 years, and we plan to love for many decades to come.
Yep. So we've talked a lot about our indefinite hold period. We think that the indefinite hold period is not just something that the IRS loves. It's not just something that we love financially. It's not just something that Brian Murray loves because the market is not going to value the asset as much as you do. It's also something that's good for the community. We see, lots of apartment buildings that are on the market that have been flipped, 3 and 4 times in the last 10 or 15 years. And when we look at that, we wince a little bit. Like, there's no way that that's a good thing for the tenants that live in those buildings, for the community, when it's, new management, new ownership every few years. People keep doing, kind of lipstick remodels over and over and over again, repainting those countertops for the second or third time. We think that an indefinite hold period aligns incentives with the tenants, with the community, with the investors, with Elaine and I. At some point we will sell these assets. There's, all sorts of very interesting, potential exits as we create this really valuable portfolio that could be valuable to other institutional players that would potentially pay a premium for it. But ultimately, we just think it's the right thing to do. So not only does it have huge financial advantages, that not only does it have massive tax advantages, we just think that it's the right thing to do for the community, for the tenants, for everyone that's involved.
Absolutely. Show up for people is one of our 7 core values. So, we've talked extensively tonight about how management is everything. I think the thing that goes with show up for people is extreme ownership. So Nick and I, we really, practice that the buck stops with us. If there's ever any problem or concern, or things don't go the way they're expected to go, or whatever, we're the ones that are responsible for that. And that the management at the asset level and the property management level is everything. And, from a property management perspective, having high quality properties with excellent renovations, coupling that with an amazing customer service experience. Many of the people listening here are likely homeowners, and so you haven't gone through the leasing process, but maybe you have, or a younger person who's at a different phase of their life, or just pick up the phone and pretend to secret shop. Property management is an industry that needs a lot of improvement, a lot of no phone calls back, very poor communication, kind of an adversarial relationship. And we just don't think that's right. We really believe in having a resident first experience, and those two things together really create magic.
Yeah. Check out our community power hour from a couple months ago. Riley and I did some role plays on literally what do those phone calls look like with our residents when we're potentially leasing a unit, when we have a tenant that maybe has some sort of behavioral problem that we need to police. These are the nitty gritty things that it's not sexy. No one is excited to talk about these things, but this makes or breaks an investment. When you have a tenant in a property that isn't following the rules, it can make it a bad place to live, and you lose your best tenants. And if you're not responsive in your leasing operations, again, you lose your best tenant prospect leads. So it's all about showing up for people. And then we do that at the investor level as well. So a lot of fund managers, they want to email and just log into the portal and do the commitment. Here's our calendar link, like here's our personal cell number. Just get on the phone with us and have a brief call. And that's probably going to, answer the question faster than an email chain or something like that will. We just love to show up for our investors, and we want our investors to show up in the most tangible sense of the words. We're having our in-person event, July 15 to 17. We want our investors to fly out and come see the assets where their money is at work. Come see where their dollars are in Main Street instead of Wall Street, and see the difference that they're making in real people's lives. So we want our investors to show up as well. There's no need for us to be some sort of gatekeeper or intermediary between investors and their assets. Come see where your money has gone. We believe in just showing up for people at every stage of the way, in every sense of the word.
Absolutely. Let's talk about where. So Nick and I live in Rochester, Minnesota. That's where most of our portfolio is. Many assets in Fund 2 will be right here in Minnesota. So lots of single family homes. We have an LOI out on a townhome community that we can't really speak to much more than that. But we had a call with the broker today, and it was a very good phone call. And so, there's a very good chance, hopefully everybody cross your fingers, that Fund 2 could have another acquisition lined up in, maybe 48 hours. Who knows with real estate?
Hoping we'd be under contract or have an accepted LOI by the time we do this webinar. But it's another home run deal that, has the potential for like a 1-year return of capital. Just a phenomenal deal that we are really, really excited about if we get it here.
So a lot of assets will be right here in Rochester, and then definitely to Nara Villa in Tacoma. And then the PPM is written such that assets could be located anywhere in the continental United States. We don't have any firm plans at this point for other states, but we wanted to kind of leave that option open. So definitely Minnesota and Washington, and then potentially some other states as well. People ask us a lot about having to file a state tax return in multiple states. So Nick and I have been filing a state tax return in both Minnesota and Oklahoma, where some of our original assets are, for over a decade. And it's just not that hard. I'm honestly not sure where this narrative comes from that filing multiple state tax returns is challenging. So you will get a K-1, and that will go on your federal tax return. And then you would need to take those numbers and file a return in Minnesota and then in Washington. And it's just those numbers, unless you happen to have other business or income in those states by coincidence, it would just be those numbers. So it technically you could kind of do it yourself on like TurboTax or something in probably less than an hour. You maybe pay a CPA a few $100s to file that. Technically, in the years that you have a paper loss, you wouldn't have to file a state return. We always recommend to people that they do, so that you memorialize that depreciation, so that in subsequent years when there's profit, you have that bucket of depreciation to go against. But it should be a very simple state return where you're just taking the numbers from your K-1 and putting it into your state return. And again, we don't just say that. We've been filing multiple state tax returns with our own portfolio for many years, and do not find it to be challenging.
No state income tax in Washington, that's correct.
Yes, very good question. We'll talk a little bit about Rochester. We'll kind of make this quick since we're going on, I think, 2 hours here. Yeah. So lots of the assets will be right here in Rochester. That's where Nick and I are. You can listen to Fund One if you want like the whole love story about Rochester or any of our other content. Home of the Mayo Clinic. More importantly, home of the Destination Medical Center. It's the largest ever public-private partnership in the state of Minnesota, the largest per capita spend on infrastructure and improvements anywhere in the country to make Rochester the destination medical center of the entire world. Mayo Clinic is just a staggeringly wonderful organization and has big goals. Yeah. So we're just excited to live in Rochester, not only because of the economic things that are happening here, but because of the culture that comes from a hospital that says, we want to be not only the best in the state and the best in the country, but the best in the world. And you just feel that living in Rochester every single day. Rochester behaves like a secondary market, kind of very similar to Tacoma, consistently rated one of the best places to live in the United States, best place to raise a family, those sorts of things, lots of public parks, excellent schools. Rochester was rated one of the most recession-resistant cities in the United States in February of 2020, before COVID. And that certainly has played out here in Rochester. Very affluent community. Things are still able to cash flow here, which is really important for the business model to have that layer of security, but then also enjoys a great deal of appreciation. Not only the appreciation wave that's coming in the whole country, but when there's this, lots of growth that comes from Destination Medical Center of not just population, but really good jobs, that drives up the value of assets. And so that's a big part of the reason we're here in Rochester. Medium to high regulatory climate, which we like everyone has to have a rental certificate on every single property. Someone has to be a licensed property manager. Both Nick and I are licensed property managers. And that, creates barriers to entry. It makes it so that it's a somewhat challenging place to invest, but it also keeps the community very nice because it keeps bad actors out of the real estate economy. Warren
Buffett would call that having a moat around your asset that protects you from competition. And at the end of the day, it has a bigger impact on, Class D assets, not as much impact on the class assets that we're involved in.
Yep, absolutely. So Rachel just said we're, more than a third of the way to our goal. Kind of watching, our email over there. I think we're at like 150 emails that we've received in the last 2 hours. So we'll just be, up all night and up first thing in the morning, returning emails and doing phone calls and those sorts of things. So Fund One was kind of the same story, where we came into it with a great deal of interest. We raised all of Fund One in 24 hours. 30 million is a big number. So I don't know if we'll raise it all tonight. I hope so. I think with the strength of the interest that we've had and the questions and, how many people are on the webinar and those sorts of things, I'd like to. I think that'd be fun. I think it would speak to how valuable an investor-focused model is. No fees, 100% goes to investors until all of their money is returned. So yeah, go to blackswanfund2.com. We had, this is always kind of a sticky part for Nick and I, because we are not these like high pressure salespeople. It's just like not in our blood. But we had to make a lot of negative phone calls back when we did joint ventures. We would, we'd be able to bring, say, 2 to 5 people into a deal, and we would have to turn away like 50 people. And we're big believers in relationships. So we would have a personal phone call with all, say, 45 people and say, sorry, we're just not able to bring you into this deal. Maybe the next time. And with the fund, that exact same thing happened. So we had 16 million of commits. We took 11 million of capital. With the regulations, you're allowed to over raise by 10%. So we were able to do that. But we had to make a lot of phone calls and say, unfortunately, it's 48 hours later and, we're not able to get you into the fund. I hope we don't have to make those calls this time. I think it's likely. But, just to say that that's what's happened in the past, and what will be
absolutely
for fund 2.
Linda just asked, how do we submit our accredited investor documents? This is an important point. You don't need to worry about your accredited investor verification letter until after you commit. So we have a regulatory compliance obligation to make every possible effort to verify someone's accreditation status. If we're unable to successfully make that verification, we have to return that capital. So you don't have to submit your letter before you can invest. You can invest, and if we don't get a letter from you, we will follow up with you and give you your money back if we're not able to get that letter from you. But don't let that be a barrier to you committing this evening if you'd like to move forward.
Yep. With Fund 1, I think we had everyone's letter in, 4 or 5 weeks. The holidays were over there too, so that kind of skewed things, but we're diligent about following up with people and making sure that those letters come in. Let's talk about Tacoma. We talked about that some in the beginning, because I think that's a question that a lot of our existing investors have, because we talk so much about Rochester. And we shared how we've had, a model of success right there in Tacoma. And then Tacoma, really feels to us very similar to Rochester.
Absolutely. So it's, the most affordable urban market in the Seattle MSA. So even though rents are high, it is still the most affordable market, as crazy as that is to believe. Seattle is the lowest cap rate market in the entire country. It's not uncommon for commercial real estate there to trade below a 2 cap. That's a tough thing for me to wrap my brain around. The thing that I like most about Tacoma is it's this really compelling transition story. So again, tens of thousands of units of affordable workforce housing were built in the 60s and 70s in Tacoma, just mile after square mile after square mile after square mile. Like Garden Court West and Nara are right next door to carbon copies of their construction style. There were tons of blue collar, heavy industrial jobs in the area. And so the government facilitated the creation of huge amounts of workforce housing. And now it's rapidly turning into a young, hip, white collar community for modern information workers. Tacoma has gone from, kind of this gritty, smelly place to live to a really cool place to live that's really close to Seattle. So it's less than a 1-hour commute to get to either downtown Seattle to work at Amazon or to Bellevue to work at Microsoft. So those are, obviously 2 huge employers. You're also close to other huge employment centers like Boeing. It's a very desirable place to live, and Tacoma is crazy as it seems, one of the most affordable places to live in that area. And that's led to extreme organic rent growth in that area. So we're seeing, 10, 15, 20% year over year rent growth in that per And that's a market that we really want to get into. Tacoma is never going to have the same rental rates as Seattle, but when you have like a, $4,000 per month rental rate in Seattle, your $2,000 rental rate in Tacoma seems strangely affordable by comparison. And then we're buying properties that currently have $900 per month rental rates. So just there's an unbelievable amount of upward potential for these assets. There's also a lot of new Class A urban infill construction in Tacoma that's proving rents that are, almost Seattle level rents. I wouldn't be surprised if at some point in the future there's a cohort of people who prefer living in Tacoma to living in Seattle, because it is lower density and just kind of I prefer Tacoma personally. I like to visit Seattle, but I would not want to live there. The density is so high and the topography is so extreme that I don't know if I'd want to live there every single day. And I find Tacoma to be just a more appealing place to live. There's the EDA has a study that shows there's a housing shortage of 250,000 units in Pierce County, which is the county where Tacoma is located. So just a staggering shortage of housing, which has led to near zero vacancy. And then much like Rochester, you can see there's an extraordinarily high median income level in Tacoma. So right now it's really fashionable, I think, to go invest in like rural Kentucky and Tennessee areas where median household income, it's like $30,000. There's no income there to support, Class B, B plus housing and future rent growth. It's just not a place that's desirable to live for a modern information worker that's ultimately going to want that premium product. We really love Tacoma because it's just like Rochester. It's a strong secondary market that rides in the wake of a strong primary market. And that's where we get this sweet spot where we can buy an asset that cash flows, but also enjoys this huge appreciation factor. Usually to get that big appreciation upside, you need to invest in a negative cash flow market like New York City or LA or San Francisco or whatever. But if you can find one of these secondary markets that are really close, like I bet if we really wanted to become an expert, we could find some suburb of Austin, Texas, where if we got the right distance out, we could still get cash flow, but we'd ride in the wake of that that appreciation cycle. So we really love Tacoma, Washington. Again, it was our relationship with Daniel Casey that really brought us there, but it would be one of our top 5 markets to invest in the whole country.
Yeah, I said earlier, we were in Tacoma 4 years ago, making plans to invest in this market. And I think when we talk about Tacoma and assets outside of Rochester, that's probably, of our existing investors, probably more than half are like really excited and, knows that we have this big vision and we can't stay in Rochester forever or, just in Rochester forever. And maybe some of them are a little confused or kind of wondering how we'll continue to drive that same level of quality. And it's important to know that the Black Swan business model is all over Garden Court West. It's all over Nara. We meet with Daniel once a week, for an hour, sometimes more. We see him in person probably about once a month. That same extreme ownership management, that's all going to happen in Tacoma. And there will be other markets in the future, whether that's in fund 2 or future funds. You don't change capitalism from one city, even as much as we love Rochester and we're still investing in Rochester, right? We're not leaving town or anything like that. A lot of the capital of fund 2 is going to go right here in Rochester. But we're very excited about Tacoma and then, potentially other markets to come as well. Yeah. I see we just got over 30 million. See that there? 30.6 million in kind of people who have submitted any sort of interest or paperwork. So very exciting.
We were at 28 or maybe a little less or something when we started. So.
I think it was lower than that. I think we were at like 24 because a lot of it had already moved over to paperwork complete and committed. So yeah, that's really exciting. Let's talk about other markets. Again, we don't have any other markets specifically chosen for Fund 2, but we want to talk about this in the event that it happens. We're big believers in relationships. We are operators. Yeah. So a lot of people, especially in the entrepreneurial world, talk about, well, how do you get out of your business or how do you work your way out of a job or those sorts of things. Those just aren't our goals. Yeah. We love working. We love, waking up every morning and thinking about how can we create value for the universe. And so we look for people that have that same mindset. So that partnership is the most important thing if and when we make a decision to invest in an outside market.
And on Friday, I was doing investor calls and wearing baby Abram. And I literally walked every single one of our apartment buildings. So I just had like literally calls all day, every day. And like, I could sit in the office, but the baby likes it better when I'm walking around. So I'm like, I'm just going to go walk every single one of our assets. So I got a lot of steps in and I walked through a lot of hallways and common areas and stuff and took a bunch of notes for the team and just living my perfect life, just getting a chance to connect one-on-one with investors, getting a chance to see our assets and, smell them and experience them and see the renovations that we're doing. And like when we talked to Daniel, he's much the same way. He's like, yeah, some people say it like holds you back or something to be an operator and not an owner, but I just like going to the place and seeing the work and, making sure that it's done the way I want it to be done. Daniel's not swinging a hammer, but he likes to see the finished product. And that's something that we absolutely respect and we look for in any partner.
And vertical integration is just absolutely critical to have that quality and control and consistency. So those of you that come to our community hours, our coaching calls, everyone says, how do I find a market? How do I find a market? Some of you could probably teach it by now. You know that we say, look for population growth. More importantly, look for good job growth. So, high population isn't great if there aren't good jobs to go with it. So it's really the two that go together, and sound employers. So businesses that have stood the test of time, an economy that has, several different economic drivers. Look for those things. That's where people need to live, because they need to live close to their job. And that's where values go up and rents go up. And if you have that just, consistent infusion of life into a community, that's where real estate is going to grow in value. So we see that in Rochester, we see that in Tacoma, lots of other markets. Anytime someone says, I'm thinking about buying an asset in XYZ state, or XYZ city in XYZ state, the first thing we do is we Google city and state population growth. And if it's positive, then that's an early indicator that it makes sense to invest in that market. And if it's negative, like, you probably can stop there and just know that if people are leaving the area, well, then housing isn't going to be as valuable. We really like secondary and tertiary markets. We're big believers in kind of a blue ocean strategy. So that allows us to have more opportunity and to, maybe compete with smaller players. So we're not competing with hedge funds and those sorts of things. And it allows us to drive higher returns. And then cities that have a winning culture and a reason why people want to live there, whether it's strong employers, strong culture, great schools, winning awards. Certainly the outdoor opportunities available in the Pacific Northwest are a big reason why people want to live there. So this is what we look for. We have a few ideas in our minds of other markets, but nothing firm yet.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the kind of assets we buy.
So we're looking at a mix very similar to Fund One. I mean, a lot of these slides are straight out of Fund One. Fund Two is 99.9% similar to Fund One. So we've got an anchor asset, a cornerstone asset here with Nara Villa Apartments. There's a difference here with Fund Two that we could target new construction. I am meeting with different developers and builders and stuff on a weekly basis, looking for a really strong opportunity to expand our Stonehaven concept to other areas. The municipality where we're building Stonehaven has experienced such explosive growth that they've actually put a 1-year moratorium on new development at this time. Try to wrap your brain around that. It's just an unreal amount of growth. Very, very sad, because we were looking at purchasing some land next door to develop, and I suppose I'm glad that we didn't. So we might do new construction, but we may not. We're leaving that option open. We want to buy or build assets that we want to buy assets that we can either buy at a B or better, or renovate into a B or better. So we'll buy a Class C or Class D asset if there's an immediate visible path to get to a Class B plus asset, exactly like we have achieved or what we expect to see with Nara Villa Apartments. We're really obsessed with quality. So really good locations, really high quality original construction. We love properties that have beautiful veneers that are long lifespan veneers. We call it prepaid capital expenditure. It's already got.
We made that term up.
A new roof or new mechanicals, and then we can go in and make cosmetic improvements. Like one of the apartment buildings we recently purchased, the entire building had been rewired, but they had never done any cosmetic electrical improvements in any of the units. So they had kind of done like the bare minimum to get up to modern code, basically, and then not a penny more. And so they left all of the value that was potentially there in terms of being able to create a premium living experience for the residents there and charge a premium rent. So
imagine that, right? You're like, you're a young person, you're renting. You've probably lived on your own for a while, but not for a long while. You certainly don't have a lot of like mechanical or technical expertise. And you walk into an apartment building and the light switches and the sockets are from like 1970
or older,
and you're feeling there. Maybe nothing about anything. You don't like comprehend that the wiring behind the wall is all brand new. All you see is that nasty socket, and you think, I'm not safe here. I won't rent here.
Yeah.
Right? Like they left the most important part.
They spent $120,000 rewiring the building. If they would have spent another, $15,000, they could have done all new electrical cosmetics throughout the whole building. And they just said, no, we'll just stop with the part that doesn't drive any sort of premium for rent to try to save money. So anywhere we see an opportunity to drive huge value like that. So an ideal mix would be we'd have, one large anchor, asset here like Nara Apartments. That's a $25 million acquisition. And then probably some smaller assets. So we mentioned there's a townhome community, a $10 million townhome community here that we hope to have under contract here in the next few days. And that would also go into Fund 2 as well. If we got a couple of more of those, that would be fantastic.
I wonder if we'll get under contract on that or fill the fund first.
We'll find out. Then the one probably informs the other. So
that's right.
Everything is meant to be, everything happens for a reason. And then we'll also potentially fill it up with single family homes. So Fund 1, we made offers on some multifamily assets. At the end of the day, we just were not excited with the pricing that we were seeing on single family or multifamily assets. We only bought a couple of single family assets in all of Q1 2022 because so we literally had $8 million cash in the bank and we're writing offers every day, but just the pricing made no sense at all. And finally, we're starting to see market conditions get to a point where there's a little more inventory and pricing is a little bit better. It's still not great, but we're able to actually get, a little bit of a discount for having like an all cash, no contingencies offer. And we're seeing sellers that are, willing to make concessions and so forth. So we were able to go from just a couple of acquisitions in Fund 1 in all of Q1 to deploying the first round of capital from Fund 1 in just a few weeks once inventory really started opening up and we saw that pricing was starting to get to a place that we were happy with. So Fund 2, it could be much the same. Historically, Q3 and Q4 have always been our really busy, months or quarters rather for acquisitions. That's just how it's been. That's typically when you get the most favorable pricing. People get itchy to sell when the weather turns cold, when the seasons change, when they don't want to have to turn the boiler on in the apartment building one more time or schedule the snow vendor to clear the snow. Or in the case of a single family home, they don't want to get out and shovel their own snow or what have you. So that's when we find the most favorable pricing by far.
Our team is probably, especially Mark and Riley, they're probably just dying laughing because we acquired so many buildings in Q3 and Q4 of last year. We got 3 buildings under contract to close on, I think, December 13th. Don't quote me on the specific day. And we're like, okay, guys, this is it. We're going to do this. We're going to take over management, really, start this off right. And then everyone will get to enjoy Christmas and New Year's. And then we got Nicholas under contract on, I think, December 3rd with a December 28th closing. And we're like, okay, guys, this is it. It's unlikely we'll acquire anything that's going to close on December 29th, 30th, or 31st. And that's just been the cycle of our business for the past 10 years. When we look at all of our acquisitions, they tend to fall a little bit later in the year.
So it's very opportunistic, that last bullet point there. We're raising funds too at this time for a reason. We're seeing, a pivot happening in the market, and we want to be there, to take advantage of that as the opportunity presents itself. So this $10 million deal that we're likely going to get under contract, we got a call from a broker that we've cultivated a very good relationship with. And he said, hey, we've got an asset that got an unsolicited offer. They want to take it. And we're seeing if we can get them a better offer. Can you get us an offer in the next 24 hours? And we said, absolutely, we can. That's our favorite thing to do. And we had them an offer in 24 hours. Those phone calls have not been happening for the last 6 months. So the market's finally starting to open up a little bit, and we're very excited to raise this fund in time to really put that capital to work at an opportunistic time in the market cycle.
It's also important to note that any of that kind of latency period, as we're looking for the absolute best deals, that's factored into, say, that like 3-year target that we're targeting. So we include that in the overall like speed that we're trying to get your capital back. And we're laser focused on spending the capital on the best assets that are most likely to have that return of capital to you as quickly as possible, because we don't participate in any of the profit until then. And we don't get an acquisition fee. So we're not just out there kind of spending the money however we can. We're slow and steady and looking for the best opportunities. We have spent all of the capital in Fund 1, including what's earmarked for the properties that are under contract. And then we're going to, recycle that capital so that Fund 1 can acquire as many assets overall as possible. And we'll do that exact same thing with Fund 2. Some of the questions kind of earlier in the night were, I'd kind of have to scroll for the exact verbiage, but like, if I'm in the fund, am I in Nara Villa? Absolutely. So Nara Villa is the cornerstone of the fund. So dollars that are put into the fund Some of those dollars go to Nara Villa. Some of those dollars will go to other assets, and it's all
a third of the funds in Fund 2 will go to Nara Villa.
Yeah, and then it's all a blended return across all of the assets that we're able to acquire. And again, this townhome community that we're psyched up and we're talking about, it's not under contract yet, but we're hoping for that favorable phone call in just the next couple of days.
Yep.
So we will raise 30 million of capital, and with that capital, we'll be able to acquire somewhere around 120 to 150 million in real estate, depending on what loan conditions we're able to get. So that's like a 70 to an 80% LTV. We work really hard to acquire as much real estate as possible with that bucket of money, because when we're in that infinite rate of return period, it's very intuitive to know that if the bucket is bigger, that infinite return is bigger, right? So we all want the biggest bucket possible with that original $30 million raise.
Total AUM is our number one objective. So we get there with maximizing our safe leverage, and that's something that really sets us apart. So a lot of groups, they might purchase some of these assets with, like 50% LTV loans for various reasons. And we're able to frequently achieve 80% or even higher leverage on some of these assets. And that really lights our returns on fire.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. So we've talked about this kind of ad nauseum. We'll just go through it really quickly here. Complexity is the enemy of execution. We have a really simple business model. Again, once it clicks for you, you totally get it. If it has clicked for you, you're probably wondering, like, why are they talking about it over and over? And it's because we know that, there's a group of people that it hasn't quite clicked for yet. And when it does, they're going to be really excited about it. So no fees, no acquisition fee, no asset management fee, no loan recourse fee. I think it's important to note that we sign personal guarantees on all of the loans. We've always done that. We're doing that for Nara. We would intend to do that for anything in the future. No fees for that. 100% of all profits go to investors until all of your capital is returned, and then a 50-50 split thereafter. Our first refi will be to return capital, and then there will be cash flow distributions quarterly after that. In subsequent years down the road, there will be future refis. You'll get a big bolus of return during those years and then continue to get quarterly returns. And we've already talked about selling everything at the very end. And then we talked about that call option, which again is really only there as like if an investor just really kind of forces us to do it, because the real value is staying in the fund for as long as possible and enjoying those infinite rates of return for as long as possible, that like 20 to 25 year period.
Yep.
Let's talk about, what if things go poorly? So we included this in Fund 1. It would be crazy to do any sort of investment without talking about, potentially what if things go poorly. And I think it's, particularly more on people's minds now with, what's happening with inflation and interest rates. We've talked about how, we've invested through the big economic downturn after 2008. And how with no fees and 100% of capital going back to you, there's a lot of safety that's built into this. And with no mandatory time of sale, that's an additional layer of safety. So I think of it as a very safe investment in comparison to other investments. And then just when we think about, decades and centuries of investment, real estate has generally always been the best vehicle to grow and preserve wealth. And that's certainly true now through whatever economic conditions might be coming up.
Yeah. So let's talk about some headwinds. So this is, a very common question that we get right now. People concerned about, prices potentially going lower or interest rates going higher. And those are very, sincere, legitimate concerns to have. So timing our refis is definitely one huge advantage here. We typically get like a 5-year fixed loan. We don't have any variable interest rate debt on the books whatsoever. If you're in our community power hour, we were pounding the table.
Get your refis. Get your refis.
Yeah, get your refis, everyone. And we practiced what we preached. So we went and we did cash out refis on every single one of our assets that we possibly could. And we unfortunately we couldn't quite beat the buzzer on Garden Court West, and there were several other assets where we were kind of in a similar boat. But we did massive cash out refis on the majority of our portfolio, and we've got super low interest rate debt locked in for the next 5 years. There are a lot of individuals who will purchase properties these days, syndicators or fund managers with variable rate debt. And I don't know, that may or may not be a wise thing to do, at this stage of the game. I don't think it was a very wise thing to do, a year ago. You can certainly get really favorable returns on the front end of the deal. because you get like a 2% interest rate or whatever, but when that interest rate is suddenly several times higher and your deal doesn't look as good, it's potentially problematic. So we're typically locking in like 5-year fixed rate debt with like a 3-2-1 step down prepayment penalty. So in year 4 and year 5, we're able to refi kind of at will with no penalty whatsoever. So we've got lots of room to work with there. And we're frequently able to refi even, in that prepayment penalty period. We just refi with that same bank, and they're always happy to do a cash out refi to, hey, you've been making the payments, the asset's worth more money. We can see the great work you're doing. We'd love for you to refi. So I wouldn't say we're super worried about rising interest rates, and I don't see interest rates going to 16% like in the 70s or something like that. I think they're going to go to 6%, somewhere in that territory for a prime rate, 6% prime rate. I think that's all the guidance that the Fed is giving right now. And then, if rates go much higher than that, if we're seeing, like a 10-year treasury north of 4%, the U.S. government can't service its debt anymore. So I think at that point, the government just lets inflation run, which is not a great thing for society, but it is a very good thing for real estate investors. So I would say, predicted many of the economic conditions that we're seeing right now. We don't have a crystal ball, but you don't have to be a rocket scientist to see that, when the government prints a lot of money and there's some of these other challenges, and there's ultimately a supply-demand disconnect in the housing industry, there's going to be a huge price growth there. Those fundamentals have not changed one iota. So rising interest rates don't worry us too terribly much. It's something that we talk about on a daily basis. So it's something that we're looking at every day. But right now, it seems like the fundamentals of our business model just have not changed that much.
A common question we get is what happens if we die? A lot of people, I think, are maybe like embarrassed to ask that question or something, because they'll kind of lower their voice or something. Hopefully it doesn't happen. We're young and healthy and wear seatbelts and don't go skydiving.
Yeah. Don't go anywhere, babe.
But if that were to happen, one has to remember that, not only are we, shepherding all of your capital, but all of the wealth our family has ever created is in this same bucket, right? So we've gone to painstaking measures to protect all of that. So we have an extraordinarily robust trust. We meet with our attorneys once a week who oversee all of our business affairs. And in the event that both of us were incapacitated or were to die, we have a 7-member board of directors. So 6 of those members are real estate experts. And the 7th is a professional trustee who essentially would serve as a tiebreaker. And we've given, very general guidance. So our property management company does all of the day-to-day operations of all of the assets. And there's a lot of, things like these webinars and other things for people to know what our vision is and what our business plan is. And then from there, we have to leave it in their hands. So, if we were to die, say 6 months ago when prices were really high, we would hope that they would make the smart decision to liquidate things, to return capital, to distribute any of the returns that needed to go out at that point. If things aren't doing so well in that part of the economic cycle, to continue to operate them. All of our assets generate cash flow. So there's that big safety margin there. And we just trust that board of directors to kind of carry on for us. So it's something we've thought, a great deal about. We take the stewardship of other people's capital very, very seriously and have very robust plans in place to manage everything in the event that we were not able to.
Yeah, to give you some perspective on sort of the level of structure that we have in place. Typically, when you're running deals like these, the lender will require you to get a special purpose life insurance policy to inject liquidity into the deal if the principal operator were to pass away. Every lender that's ever asked us that, we give them our trust and they'll review it. And basically, the feedback has always been, if you have put this much thought into being dead, we look forward to doing business with you while you're still alive. And they've always waived that requirement for a life insurance policy because they've seen that if Elaine and I did pass away, everything would be well managed. So if the bank, and I'm sure you all have worked with bankers, they can be very detail oriented, we'll say. If the bank will sign off on that, then I think our investors can sleep well at night as well.
Perfect. I see, Rachel's doing some technical troubleshooting for people. So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for all of your hard work, Rachel. Rachel has been handling dozens, if not 100 kind of technical questions over the last several days of how do I sign my PPM? How do I remit capital? Those sorts of things. She's just a rock star. We're so grateful to have her on our team. We are closing in, close on 15 million in the fund now. So kind of keep it coming if you want to get in fund 2.
Yep. We're very excited.
Let's talk about servant leadership. So those of you that are listening, you probably understand by now, this is very different than a typical fund or syndication, not just an alignment of incentives, but really putting the needs of our investors first and doing so in a way that, the numbers clearly speak for themselves. We raised fund 1 in a day. Our joint ventures before that would fill in hours. That's why we created the fund, to be able to serve more investors. We're seeing, similar outcomes unfolding for fund 2. We think this is how capitalism should be done. We think this is how the relationship between you, our investors, and us, the operators, should be, that you are protected and served first, and we only participate in any profit if you are also participating in that profit along the way. We call it like the lemonade stand model. If you have a child that wants to open a lemonade stand, you might say, hey, I'll buy your lemons, and get you a little stand and a sign and some sugar and a pitcher. You're going to need to pay me back all of my money. So all of the capital that you generate from your first 100 lemonade sales are going to go to me as the investor, and then we'll have a 50-50 split after that. It's really that simple. So it takes out all of the kind of complexities that, really when we think of them, and when we talk to other general partners, things like waterfalls and prefs and those sorts of things, they're really sort of meant to confuse investors. We kind of chuckle, like, really, every single investment out there really gets to a 17% IRR? Like, really? Like, do all humans weigh the same, or all humans are the same height, but miraculously every investment is a 17% IRR? Like, So we just don't mess with any of those shenanigans.
I don't know if you all have noticed that before, but have you ever noticed that every single real estate syndication and private equity fund somehow magically has the exact same projected rate of return? There's just a make-believe, market standard that's been agreed upon, and you tweak your pro forma to fall into that box. And that's why we really decline to have a discounted, cash flow analysis or 5-year projection. It's all made up.
Yep.
It's to give some sort of false sense of safety. And like a preferred rate of return, it seems like a mechanism that protects the investor, but really the opposite is true. Because if that pref were to accrue, let's say you had a rough couple of years, and that pref accrued to a point where the active partner had to dig themselves out of a hole in order to get to where they would earn an equity split in the deal. At that point, the only way for them to make money on the deal is to sell it if they get a disposition fee. And so all of a sudden, this you're in a down market and the asset is struggling, and the only way that the general partner can make money is to sell the asset. They're going to sell the asset, even if that means the limited partner loses money. Whereas with our model, well, if the limited partner is going to lose money, that means we too are losing money. And so we're definitely not going to sell. We'll hold steady. And likewise, a waterfall structure that incentivizes higher and higher levels of return, again, appears as though it's some sort of protection mechanism for the limited partner, the capital partner. But again, the reverse tends to be true, because it's so easy to manipulate those figures. So, if we had a waterfall structure in place on the Nicholas, we would sell the Nicholas today, because we've made, a 115% return in the last quarter, a completely insane return. But rationally, you should think, why would you ever sell an asset? Why would you ever sell an asset that's delivered such an unreal level of return like that? That'd be the craziest thing you could possibly do. You want to hold on to that golden goose that's laying golden eggs. Who knows how many more eggs it could possibly lay? So these optics, these kind of opaque compensation schemes for general partners. I don't know. There's a little bit of a soapbox moment here, but they just make no sense. It's just completely insane. That any of these mechanisms are industry standard in our part. They only serve to disalign incentives between the active partners and the passive partners. And so that's why we've built our fund the way we've done. All of our incentives are completely aligned. We only make money the way our investors make money, which is through equity in the deal, and only after our investors have gotten a full return of capital. And so any rational person should be able to think of that and just think through that and think, okay, so if I'm paying out fees, I'm paying out splits, I'm paying out these other opaque compensation mechanisms, in what ways are my incentives not necessarily aligned with the person who's running the deal?
Absolutely. So we talked a lot about vertical integration. So we have a real estate sales team. Nick and many of the members on our team are licensed real estate agents. If our team was to represent us in a deal, we could receive up to a 3% buyer's commission. If our team does not represent us in a deal, then there wouldn't be a buyer's commission. Same thing for construction. So if we were to do a new construction project and we were to serve as the developer on that project, there could be up to a 3% development fee. If we hired a different developer, then there wouldn't be that fee to our team. So vertical integration, we really like it because it allows us to drive quality and control. And again, that extreme ownership feeling of if there's a problem, it stops with us. We're the ones that made those decisions. And so there are potential compensation opportunities that could go to our team, but could go to other people if we were to hire those services out. And then we talked earlier in the presentation about our all-in property management fee.
Yep. So just as an example there, like Nara Villa, we're getting zero compensation on the front end of the deal. And Daniel's getting zero compensation on the front end of the deal. If we're able to negotiate a commission, great. If we purchase a single family home in Rochester, there's usually a commission split that's available on those deals. Not always, but there typically is. So those are ways that we earn income for our real estate sales team and for our property management company. But those are very different from asset management level splits and fees. Those fees are just straight money coming out of the pocket of limited partners into the general partners. And these other splits or commissions that we might receive are coming from the sellers of the asset. So a very different type of compensation there.
And the level of fees that we waived in Q1 alone for Fund 1 was $787,000. So
staggering number of fees.
That's just money that's still in the bucket to go back to limited partners, to keep our eye on the ball of how do we get their money back to them as quickly as possible so that we can participate in this at all.
That gets us halfway to the refi, guys. Like, just try to wrap your brains around that for a second. So if we waived, $800K in fees, and we had an $11 million fund, we only need, $2.2 million to get to a cash out refi, essentially of value creation. I hope that makes sense what I just said. I ran through a couple concepts very quickly there. So from our perspective, waiving these fees really serves our interest because we get to race to that infinite rate of return as quickly as possible.
We already covered this slide. We've talked about this extensively. So all the profit goes back to you until you're totally repaid. We anticipate that will take less than 5 years. That's something that kind of people will get hung up on is, well, 5 years, that sounds like a long time. It's about how long your money would be in a different type of syndication. And to date, it's never taken us that long. So we try to be really conservative with the expectations that we set with people. Historically, we're able to do that in about 3 years. Limited cash flow during that time. And again, that should intuitively make sense that we're taking that bucket of money and acquiring real estate and spending money on renovations. And then after kind of things start to stabilize, then there are cash flow distributions. So for Fund 1, for example, we raised that in Q4 of 2021, and we anticipate that the first distributions for Fund 1 might go out in Q1 of 2023, get to that cash out refi in about 3 years, and then an infinite rate of return thereafter. We already covered this slide as well, so we'll kind of skip over it for now. If you have any questions about this and it hasn't quite clicked for you yet, schedule a one-on-one call. We have our calendars cleared for basically the rest of the week. I would encourage you to get one as soon as you can. Last time we cleared our schedules for like a week and people kind of picked days 6 and 7, and then they just weren't able to get into the fund because we had filled it by then. But we've gone out of our way to clear our calendars. So schedule a call if you have any questions about that or anything, or you just want to talk to us and meet us. It's our favorite thing to do is to talk to our investors. Let's talk about our track record. So we've covered some of the things about our single family home portfolio that we own ourselves, Garden Court West, which is the one that most informs our business plan at Nara Villa. So that was a critical one to talk about early. In this presentation, in terms of SEC compliance, we are sharing details about all of the investments that we have put together, where we have included investor capital and also our personal single family home portfolio, and that this is all past performance. So that's the best indicator of future results, but certainly not a guarantee. New 52 apartments. We love this one. We actually drove by it just a few days ago.
This is like a mile away from our personal home, and so we get to see it often. We bought this asset a month after we bought Garden Court West for a very similar purchase price, $9.9 million. This was a really interesting deal. It's a 2016 build, but it had never been full in the whole time that it had been in existence. It never got to 100% occupancy. And so there was a little bit of a question of, is the asset, cursed in some way, or how the heck could a new construction asset never get full in an otherwise desirable location? We took over management, and in short order, we were able to fill up the asset. And this is probably our second most successful deal of all time, second only to Garden Court West. After 9 months, the asset appraised at $12.75 million. And we walked in with nearly $1 million of equity at the closing table as well. So at that point, we should have been able to achieve a full cash out refi we had one joint venture partner that brought the $2 million cash to close on that deal. Identical, deal structure to our private equity fund here. Unfortunately,
I think he's here. So hello. I think
hello.
I saw you earlier today.
Yeah. So, we should have been able to achieve a full cash out refi, but kind of like with Garden Court West, the bank's like, wait a second, you've only had this thing for 9 months. How the heck have you made $3 million in that time? We would easily market this property for, I would probably accept no less than 17 million for it today. So I think we have probably made, $7 million on this asset here in the last 9 months. Again, past outcomes are not necessarily indicative of future results. This was an out of the park home run deal here. But it was just a management play. Like, the asset was really in good condition. It just needed fresh management that was, willing and able to aggressively manage the asset and get the ship kind of turned around. And we've had some spectacular results with that particular asset. We actually did get a cash out refi on. I was able to negotiate a partial cash out refi with the bank. They discounted us from an 80% LTV to like a 62% LTV or something totally insane. They gave us, was it like 500K or?
It was 360,000, which was about 18% of the down payment. And so, with returning almost 20% of the original down payment, that increases the cash on cash, very significantly, because the denominator is much smaller. And then the total annualized rate of return is like close to 50%, because there's so little money in the deal now. And then you were already beginning conversations with that bank of, hey, when we hit a year, August, September, like, we need to talk about getting even more capital out of the deal.
Yep.
All of these were also included in Fund One. So I'm going to go a little bit faster because we are getting late. You all are a very sticky crowd. We've lost very few people, but I'm sure people want to get to families and maybe some of you are on call and those sorts of things. So like, the full details are in our Fund One presentation. And I think now we'll kind of do a brief summary and then kind of fill you in on what has happened in, say, the last 6 months since that Fund One webinar. Lofts is part of our downtown Rochester campus. We just love this building. It's just so handsome. It was built in, I think, 2012?
2016.
13 right there. Just really premium construction, tall ceilings, beautiful cabinets, windows galore. We paid $3.7 million for this project. We have 2 investors on this. This was when we're doing our joint ventures, which again are structured exactly similar to our fund model, just much smaller groups. We purchased this in fall of 2021 at the appraisal value of April 2020. And it's not hard to know that during that, say, 18 months, real estate values rose considerably. So we walked into this with
20% on average nationally. Yeah,
we walked into this deal with a great deal of equity. In addition to our 80% LTV loan, we were able to negotiate a $200,000 no interest, no payment seller carry for 5 years. So the amount of capital that needed to come into this deal is extraordinarily low. We've raised rates quite a bit as that natural turnover has happened. Our in-place rents are now $1,369. I checked that again because this number was from our Fund One number, and we're right on target there. A lot of the leases here are longer leases, so it's taking a while to turn over leases. But every time we have a unit vacant in this building, it just fills right up.
It's been an average 15% rent escalation, something like that, when we've renewed.
Yeah. So we would consider this, kind of a base hit. We anticipate we'll get investor capital back in, say, that 3 to 4 year time frame, and then just enjoy cash flow and appreciation for the next 20 or 25 years.
Not in as big of a hurry to cash this one out, because we have a no interest, no payment loan for 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not in a hurry to repay that no interest loan.
Yep. And for those of you that are newer to us, our Rochester campus, right in the neighborhood that is close to the Mayo Clinic, we have acquired a number of buildings that are kind of these small, medium-sized multifamily buildings, and they're all right next to each other. So you can kind of see in this picture, Lofts is there in the middle, and then the building to the left, we own that building. The building to the right, we own that building. 2 buildings over, we own that building. Nicholas is right behind that. There's kind of a growing campus is what we call it. And so all of these, we'll kind of point out when they're in the campus, they're part of a bigger strategy to bundle up these assets and really drive value and efficiencies there. Midtown Apartments is also right here in Rochester. We purchased this one at $2.6 million.
Very similar to Nara Villa in a lot of
Very
ways.
similar. Yeah. The construction's kind of the same. I think the years, within just a few years of each other.
1968 construction, 1972 or something at Nara Villa.
Yep. And Garden Court West, I think, is 1965.
Yep.
Really love this asset. It's in a part of town that has kind of just been ho-hum for the last several decades, that the city is just pouring money into, with improving the roads and the commerce that's happening there, and doing a huge sidewalk renovation, just really bringing new life to that area of the community. And we saw that happening and jumped right on this asset. So we paid $2.6 million for it. We walked in with a hair of equity. It appraised for 2.7.
That's really weird, by the way. It's not normal for things to appraise for more than you paid for them. So just because you see that over and over again on our slides, don't think that that's a common occurrence. That's extraordinarily rare for you to buy assets and have the appraisal come in, over the purchase price.
Yep. We've done rent escalations here, again, being really sensitive to the people that are living here. So rent escalations typically happen when someone's lease is up and they were already planning on moving out. We'll move a new resident in at a higher rental rate. So we got to $950 per month before we really did any renovations. We are doing an extreme renovation at this property. I'm sure Riley's just chuckling just how often we're sending him here to do renovations, work on things. So I think right now it's 32 units. I think we have 10
units that are down for it. So literally a third of the complex is vacant right now for renovation.
Yeah.
So it is a well-organized circus, contractors going from unit to unit, and old tenants moving out, new tenants moving in. And our team just has done a fantastic job, managing that project. We were originally targeting $1,000 per month for rental rate for our renovated units. We ended up getting to $950 before even renovating them, and so we started leasing our renovated units at $1,100 per month, and now we're testing $1,200 per month. So this is a very similar story to Nara Villa, where the average individual who had lived in this property, some people had lived here for 50 years. They're very elderly, and this is a part of town where it didn't make sense anymore. This is now kind of a young, hip part of town, and so we're totally reimagining, what this asset is, who it appeals to, and our financial outcomes of this project have been extraordinary.
Awesome. This one is just so similar to Nara, as I'm talking through this, kind of similar age, lots of open space here. So it's kind of hard to see in this picture, but the 4 buildings in the front there are the asset. And you can see just all the trees all around it. So lots of green open space that really wouldn't be there today if this were built today, because land is at such a premium. We have one partner in this one, and it is just
we're trying to take possession of some vacated city land next door that is on Cascade Creek, which is a very desirable parcel of land. So we love deals that have interesting value upside potential like that.
Absolutely.
There's land that's been abandoned for 100 years next door to this asset that the city has just kind of had, but we're pretty sure we could take ownership of the land. So we'll see what happens there.
The next deal we'd like to talk about is Uptown Landing and Uptown Terrace. So these are 2 separate buildings, a total all-in purchase price of $5.1 million. It's 41 units across the 2 buildings, 1962 construction. I think you're probably sensing a theme here. We were able to get $150,000 of a seller paid repair escrow at closing, We have such a great relationship with the bank who financed these. Typically that money would go into an escrow account. You would have to submit receipts and those sorts of things. It's just kind of logistically challenging,
And there's costs associated with
it.
Yeah,
you might spend $3,000 or $4,000 setting up an escrow account, and the lender just allowed us to apply it to our down payment. So it's a huge win that was able to drive down the total amount of capital that needed to come into this deal. We also were able to secure a very favorable $400,000 construction financing from that same bank. Also very simple. So they essentially put $200,000 for each of the assets into a bank account and said, just withdraw it as you need it. So really what I'm speaking to there is the relationships that we create with banks. So in Tacoma, Garden Court West is financed by Sound Community Bank, and Nara will be financed by Sound Community Bank. So we're big believers in those local regional banks, having personal relationships with them. Nick was just on the phone with the bank today, and anyone that's been to our stuff knows, someone's probably reciting it in their head, is it's 50% the deal and 50% the debt. And together, that's where the magic comes from. And so there's some examples that you're seeing there. These buildings were about half renovated when we closed on them. We've continued that same renovation. So we worked with the seller to source the cabinets and the countertops and the appliances and everything so that it all matches, so that when they're done, it has that nice new construction feel and isn't what we call like a Franken building, where all the units are different, and it's not great for asset value. It's not great for community cohesiveness. It makes leasing very challenging because you show someone a unit with white cabinets, but you only have a unit with wood cabinets available or whatever. So we're big believers in doing swift renovations that are as cohesive as possible to really get to that new construction feel. And then we've had great proven rent escalations here. We're doing about $20,000 per unit. So again, you're seeing that pattern where we do deep value add. We don't just go in and paint things.
I think we're up to about $30K per unit. But we've had a lot of value to show for it. That's for sure.
Yeah, these have been just great assets. It's one ownership group that owns those two. I think I saw a few of them on the call tonight. I know some of them are coming to our live event in July, so we're super excited about that. We talked about our single family home portfolio. Is there anything else you want to add there?
Nope, just using that same business model over and over and over again for a decade, and buying larger and larger assets. Just not getting bored with what works and doing the same thing over and over again. You can see we buy properties that need some TLC, or there's a problem to solve. When we solve that problem, we increase the value, and then we're able to do a cash out refi to return that capital and go do it all over again.
Absolutely. I see lots of people are maybe having some technical difficulties with InvestNext. Thank you for your patience with that. How I really think about it is InvestNext is really a software that's designed for the utmost security, right? A lot of capital is moving through InvestNext right now. We're close to like 15 million of commits and well over 30 of expected amounts. So we appreciate your patience with that. Reach out to Rachel, Riley, and Mark tonight if they're able to kind of help you one-on-one, schedule a call with us. We'll make sure you get all that paperwork done, but I'm kind of following that along, and I hope that you're still able to kind of listen in on the.
I thought, when I was doing calls, I thought I'd be like answering questions about the fund, and most people were like, "Yeah, I just want to get the money in. How do I do that?" So
So I just wanted to thank you all for your patience there. Stonehaven Townhomes. So this is just an amazing new construction project that Nick and I have been working on for several years now. And this helps to inform you of what a new construction project might look like if a new construction project was included in Fund 2. So this is ground up construction on 115 townhomes. Phase 1 was the first 30 townhomes. We purchased those complete. They were very poorly managed. So kind of long story short, it was a roofing company that decided they would be a general contractor on the build of these 30 townhomes. They leased, I don't know, maybe 20 of them, and then said, "Oh my gosh, we don't want to be a property management company. What do we do?"
Who could have seen that coming?
This is really hard. So we purchased those 30 and then the surrounding land to build the other 85. Phase 2 is more than 50% complete. It's on budget, which is like the victory of our lifetime in this.
It's a tough time to be on budget in construction. Construction costs are up 25% in the last 12 months.
Yeah.
And we locked our construction loan 12 months ago. So I think we're doing pretty good. If you look at the like the NASDAQ lumber index, like we bought at the absolute bottom of lumber pricing. Lumber, tripled in price after we locked our lumber. I really credit just an incredible builder. I think our builder partner on this deal has done phenomenal work. So I can't take any credit for that. But we've just been there to do our part whenever help was needed at the developer level, which is our role on this project. And then I can't wait for our property management team to step in here. We're going to open up our first units here August 15th.
Riley and Mark, how many are pre-leased? Drop that into chat for us. So phase 3, we're moving full steam ahead on that. We have our loan proposal. We're working with a bank that we've worked with on many of the projects that we've talked about here. Our builder built lofts, which we also talked about, built Nicholas and Oliver building Stonehaven.
Hamilton
that we're going to talk about here. So again, just leaning on those relationships over and over and over. That's something we talk about, and we want to be that relationship for you when you're looking for a place to put your capital. We want you to think, what's the relationship that I can leverage to get the best outcomes, and then we're doing that. So we're we're practicing what we preach. So working with a builder that has built many of the buildings that we own, and just has amazing outcomes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Phase 3, we collapsed phase 3 and phase 4 into one phase. We doubled the pace of the project there so we can complete as soon as possible. It's just been so successful. We want to get this thing to the finish line, and we could theoretically include a future Stonehaven project in Fund 2. I don't know how likely that is, but it's possible. And we'd probably be working with the same builder, same development consultant, same engineering firm, just repeating that success. This product has been fantastically successful. It's enjoyed extraordinarily low vacancy, really strong rent growth. Just people love this product. Almost no expenses to speak of. There's no common area expenses. We don't have someone going and cleaning once a week. We don't pay for trash and water, and just it's kind of the best of both worlds. It has the economies of scale and management ease of a multifamily project with the low expenses and overhead of a single family project. I mean, weeks will go by where no one ever visits this asset. We forget that we've got a whole subdivision of townhomes out there because it's just such a low touch asset.
Next, we will talk about Fund 1. So Fund 1 acquired the Nicholas and Oliver apartments. I encourage you to watch the Fund 1 video. That one was a lot of fun. We raised that whole 10 million that night, and just was, again, just thank you guys so much. You guys just make our wildest dreams come true. So we acquired Nicholas and Oliver apartments. It was a $23 million deal. We brought $2.3 million in capital for the down payment. The rest of the financing was through assuming the existing loan that the sellers had, and then about a $9 million no interest, no payment seller carry for about 7 years. So it matches the remaining loan term on the loan.
You heard that right, by the way. That's $9 million, no interest, no payments for 7 years. So a somewhat favorable loan.
Yeah. So this is a chance to say past outcomes don't always equal future returns. So one of our investors, I hope you're listening. I hope you get a little chuckle out of this. He messaged me and he said, one of the strengths of Fund 1 was your financing on Nicholas and Oliver. And his name's not Joe, but I said, Joe, I really appreciate that you hold me to such high standards. That was probably the best financing we will ever get in our lives, but we're going to keep working for equivalent.
The new standard.
The new standard. So you've seen in these deals how, we work so hard to have things like seller carries, if possible, working with local banks, getting the most favorable debt terms, including construction financing. That's a big one, to have that big construction piece just included.
Zero origination charges on any of this. We paid $2.3 million in total cash to close. So most deals you would spend several $100,000 just in closing costs alone on a deal of this size. And we spent, I think, like 20 grand or something like that.
Just
a laughably
a rounding error.
trivial amount of money. to close a $23 million deal.
Yeah.
So we're always just looking for opportunities to really ratchet down those efficiencies, those little 1% things here and there. They add up to a mountain of money in the long run.
Yep. So Fund One has either purchased or is under contract on 29 single family homes as of our last count. We really have the single family thing, dialed in, and that's just kind of a pipeline of value that we're able to create. We got our first proposal for debt today on those. Yeah, I think we got 3 proposals. They're all very good. So we'll now do, a round of working with them to see who can tweak their proposal to make it the most attractive. But looking at things like a 25-year amortization. We have one that's a 30-year amortization.
Incredible.
75 or an 80% LTV. I think they're all at 80%. Fixed interest rate, very important. You've heard us talk about why that's so critical. And then, some of them are able to do like very expedited appraisals, those sorts of things.
We'll ask for them to waive title insurance. So just do a title opinion. We'll ask for them to waive documentation fees. Sometimes we're able to close these loans for just like a few $100s per property, just extraordinarily low, total lending cost. So again, just doing everything we can to ratchet down all those little, it adds up to a huge amount of money in aggregate. And this is where we really bring our unfair advantage. Very few people are going to be able to get the same level of debt terms. So if you went and bought a single family home on your own, I think that's a great spiritual model, and we really love that ownership model. But you're just not going to be able to get the same debt terms that we can get when we get 27 single family homes worth of debt at one time, and we can go solicit multiple competitive debt proposals because we own them all outright, and banks are murdering each other to be the one that gets that debt. They all want that debt, so we're able to get extraordinarily good terms on that debt, and just optimizing all those little pieces of the puzzle is where we're able to bring huge value to the deal.
Yep. And that brings us to the end. So lots of people have moved forward. We're close to 15 million. I'd love for someone to get us over 15 million tonight. That would be a lot of fun to have raised half of our fund in one day, or maybe more. So
it certainly blew away our fundraising total for Fund One. Just a humbling amount of interest in this opportunity.
Yep. And we are at well over 30 million of people who have submitted interest. So that's the number where we were with Fund One. So we had like 16 million. And that's what led to, the next day people talk to their spouses and look at their bank accounts and those sorts of things. So I anticipate there's going to be a flurry of activity
it's
here.
First come, first serve for remitting capital. So even though there's over 30 million, there's 31 million right now. That doesn't mean that the fund is full and you shouldn't invest. I mean, no doubt many of those people, they, get the process started, and then they, for whatever reason, they talk to their spouse and they decide not to move forward. It's not a good time. So I would just recommend that you sign the PPM as soon as you can. That kind of is what saves your spot there, and then remit capital as soon as you can. But it is exciting to see us cross that 30 million mark.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you all so much for that. I see Rachel and Riley and Mark have been helping lots of people today. So thank you to everyone that has made the decision to invest this evening. Here are the steps to that. So logging into the portal, that's blackswanfund2.com. First, you make a commitment, then you sign the PPM and the operating agreement. Then you can set up transmission of funds. The safest way to do that is right there in InvestNext using their ACH product. It's very safe. It's very secure. There are wiring instructions in the portal if you want those. And again, that's the only place we'll put them. We won't email them, those sorts of things to prevent any type of wire fraud. If you wire funds, please email us and let us know so that we can manually mark the portal that you've sent them, and that make sure that we hold your spot. If you need some time to move capital around, email us and let us know. I've seen we've gotten lots of those emails tonight. So long as we know, we're able to hold your spot, but it is generally first come, first serve, because we've just found that, with all of our opportunities, we've had so much interest that, that's kind of how we find it's the most fair way to make those decisions. And then as Nick mentioned, you can send in your verification of accredited investor status after that. So make a good faith effort to get that letter to us as quickly as possible. In about a month, we'll kind of see how the dust settles. And if you haven't sent it, we'll reach out to you to get it. If you aren't able to prove your accredited investor status, we would need to return your capital. We didn't have to do that at all with Fund One, but just know that that doesn't have to be a roadblock to you making your decision. And a little picture here of baby Abram, and just a moment of gratitude before we go on to Q&A. You guys are just really amazing. We're just so lucky. Like I'm getting all choked up here. Getting to serve you guys is like the joy of our lifetime. That we just get to be at the nexus of creating value for you and your family, and doing that for decades to come, and doing so in a way that makes the world a better place to live in the most tangible sense of the word, and creating these amazing operational businesses with our property management company and construction. And we're just so lucky. Yeah. So
yeah, I was on an investor call late last night talking to a husband and wife, and one of them is a CEO of a very large organization, and obviously both of them are extremely smart people. And they said, we've never seen like a syndication or fund that looked interesting to us. We couldn't even understand what it was we were investing in. The fees and stuff was so complicated. Yours is the first that ever made sense to us, and it makes so much sense, and we can't wait to get started. I think we're going to fly out and just like have a dinner with them here sometime soon. Like there are just so many cool people that we get the privilege to serve, and they have a foundation as well, just like we do. So there's like all these really serendipitous alignments there. We're so incredibly lucky to have the opportunity to serve this group.
Yep. Yeah, lots of physicians, lots of dentists, lots of non-physicians. We have an Olympian. We have people that are household names.
Former elite law enforcement.
Yep.
Just very interesting people with very interesting stories.
Yep. And we're just so grateful that, of all the investment options out there, many of you choose to invest with us, and that means a great deal to us. So thank you. This is baby Abram here. He was born on April 6th, and that he is born at the same time that Fund 2 is being born. And I just have this vision in my mind that, he's a 25-year-old young man, and what will he look like, and what will he study in college, and what will his job be, and what will his interests be? And, I always joke, will he be living on Mars? I hope not. As his mama, I want him close by. And Fund 2 will still be going. And, that's what it means for our family. I encourage you to think about, what it means for your family. People have shared stories like, one of our investors has 2 young adult sons that they both have a very serious disability. And so he's looking for ways to generate income for them, well into their adulthood. And this is the mechanism to do that. One of our investors is quite a bit older than his wife. And so he's looking to generate an investment that will outlive him, that will provide for his wife for many years after his potential passing. Lots of stories like that. I could think of more, but I want to get to Q&A here. So thank you all so much for everything. You guys are just an awesome group.
All right, we've got a lot of questions.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of them. I'm looking for a way to stop screen share. Boop. There we are. There's our faces.
Full screen.
Full screen. There we are. Big. So we will start going through our questions here. We tried to cover some of them as we went along, but we're just going to go until they're all answered. That's a really important value for us, that you guys are making big decisions, and we want to show up for you. It's one of our core values, show up for people right there. Go for it.
Yeah. How will taxation work for out-of-state investors? So you'll need to file a state return for Minnesota and Washington. And that's pretty much it. I mean, it's a really simple, straightforward process. You can do it yourself in TurboTax. We've done that for years. You can have your CPA do it. It's usually a couple $100 or something. Depends on your CPA how much they might charge. So that's pretty much it. We don't at this point plan on doing a combined K1 or anything like that. So you'll just have a state by state, filing there.
Excellent question. Margaret asked, can you start as joint tenancy and later change to an LLC? Yes. So, for example, in Fund 1, we've already had situations where people want to move their ownership into, say, a trust, or maybe they've gotten married or those sorts of things. There's a very simple fee. We take care of that with the attorneys to move that interest, but that's easy peasy, no problem. Mm-hmm. You should endeavor to invest in the entity that you think will be the entity that you intend to invest in long term. But if you need to make that change, that's no problem. Yep. That question we addressed, it was a technical question that Rachel has been taking care of. Jeff asked, for Nara Villa, the $24 million includes construction costs for renovation of the units.
Yeah, so that's the purchase price. 24.15 million is the purchase price, and then we're estimating perhaps 5 or 6 million for renovations at this time. So we need to get to at least 36 million to get a cash out refi at an 80% LTV. We're going to hit 36 million in value on this asset. So those are kind of the high level numbers at this time. Is 24 million to buy, 5 or 6 million to rehab, and then 36 million to hit a full cash out refi.
Excellent question about, are you planning for earthquake insurance for our Tacoma assets? So for those of you that don't know, there's what's called like the super earthquake because of the tectonic plates
so
there.
There's no routine earthquakes whatsoever in Tacoma.
Right. But modeling shows that there's an earthquake at a certain frequency, and we're kind of in that window where that earthquake may or may not happen. There's all sorts of speculations of, could it be today? Could it be 10 years from now, 30 years from now, 100 years from now? So an excellent question about earthquake insurance.
Yeah, we've chosen not to at this time. It's fairly expensive, and the odds of a payout are pretty low. It is kind of grisly to think about, but in the event of one of these subduction fault earthquakes, it is possible that whatever insurance carrier we have could actually not be able to pay because there would be so many claims. And it would be, the government would likely step in at that point because the vast majority of buildings are uninsured for earthquake. And so kind of like with COVID assistance, there almost certainly be some huge assistance package from the government. I wince a little bit to say that, but the fact is all of our research indicates that it's unlikely that there is a compelling ROI on an earthquake insurance product for assets in Tacoma. Now, if you're in like California, where there's routine milder earthquakes, we'd almost certainly have insurance on those assets. So the earthquake's not so big it bankrupts the insurance company and there's like government help or whatever. It's a more common, predictable type of earthquake structure. Yeah.
And the way Tacoma is situated geographically, it's further inland than, say, Seattle because of the sound. So it's much more protected. So it's something we thought about extensively. We did tons of modeling with Garden Court West and made the decision, not to go with earthquake insurance, but a very good question. Ronald asked, given the increase in residential property values, is it perhaps not likely that there will be a reversion to the mean over the next few years? Yeah,
I mean, everyone's crystal ball is broken. No one can say for sure. We've done, state of the market, every year for many years. And I think pretty much all of our predictions have been accurate. At this time, we don't have a single dial on our dashboard that says that, there's a crash coming or anything like that. I'd say that we have crested the mean certainly here in the last 12 months, but pretty much all the appreciation that was seen up until that point is really just catch up from what was lost in 08. So, we were actually below all of our kind of historic means until just last year. So right now, what we're seeing is just a supply-demand disconnect. Construction prices have gone up by 25% in the last 12 months. So replacement costs has gone way up. The value of existing real estate is really just a function of replacement costs. So if your home is worth 50% of replacement costs as a used home or whatever, and replacement cost goes up by 25%, the value of that used home goes up by 25%. That's how the number works. We've certainly seen a softening in pricing, and that's why we're raising funds too, to be honest, is because we're excited to get some favorable pricing for a change. But there's just so much liquidity out there. There's so much capital out there that's almost impossible there could be any kind of crash. And there's just so many more buyers than sellers, both in multifamily and in single family, that it's hard to see any kind of 08 type event occur. There's just no dial on the dashboard that says that there's something like that on the horizon right now.
Mm-hmm. This is something that we talk about in, probably all of our monthly community power hours. So if you're not attending those, I highly recommend it. It's just once a month we get together. We usually do like a teaching topic. We cover Q&A as much as we can. Sometimes we just open it for just Q&A. That's what we did last month. That was a lot of fun. But
this question came up.
Yep. It's so, these are the things that we're always thinking about. And so we give kind of our assessment monthly about, well, how are interest rates? What's the Fed doing? How's construction? Those sorts of things. So excellent question there. Lynn asked, can a few people pull together to invest in this fund, 2 of whom are married and are accredited, and 1 of whom is family but not accredited?
So the first thing I'll say is we have no obligation to do any entity level due diligence on any investment investor in the fund. We must verify the accreditation status of an investor in an entity, but we're not going to interrogate an operating agreement or shareholders or anything of that nature. So that said, the SEC standard would be that technically all members of the LLC are supposed to be accredited. I hope that made sense what I just said, because I sort of said 2 different things there. So our obligation is to get at least one accreditation verification letter, but it would be a little bit crazy for us to be looking through entity filing documents on every single LLC that invested in the fund. So I hope I was able to answer that question. If you want to dig into that more, feel free to block a time with me to chat about that further. And I hope that made sense the way I answered that question.
We have had lots of people, so I can think of a situation where a mother and 2 daughters have pooled funds together to create an entity. They are all accredited. So we have had lots of people do that. A helpful way to get to that $100,000 minimum. Ingrid asked, does property depreciation get passed to investors as well? Absolutely. So we share in the depreciation if we sign on the note. So if we have full recourse on the note, we may share in the depreciation. If we don't, then all of that depreciation gets passed on to investors. But our goal is really to make it that you have enough depreciation in your bucket so that as you get future cash flow distributions, you're kind of chewing up that negative bucket so that you have the most favorable tax situation all the way through. And then it's important to note 2 things. One is that cash out refis are not a taxable event. So that is just so important. So let's say there's a situation where someone does a cash out refi and they're able to get $100,000 out of a single family home. That's completely tax neutral. So $100,000 hits their bank account and then that's it. If there was a sale that led to $100,000, there would be tax consequences to that. So that's a big part of the reason we love cash out refi events. So cash flow will chew away at your depreciation bucket, but those big cash out refis will not. And then with this long time horizon, no one has to think about any depreciation recapture for several decades. So unlike a typical model where you enjoy depreciation and deferral of taxes is always great. But I think we'd all agree that deferring taxes for 20 years or 25 years is better than deferring taxes for say 3 or 5 years. So there's that long horizon that this business model is really favored by the IRS. So lots of depreciation. Our goal is to make this as tax advantageous as possible for our investors. We know that's a big deal in generating overall returns for your family's wealth.
When do you start getting quarterly returns? Do you return all capital first before returns start? So once we start producing cash flow from the assets, then we'll start delivering quarterly returns. That will probably kick in about a year after you invest into the fund. And it really just depends on asset performance. So Nara Villa, for example, it's such a deep value add. We're doing such massive construction there. It's not likely that project's going to throw off a lot of cash flow before we get to our refi window. We're going to be, basically churning through those units as fast as we possibly can to race to refi. If we buy a single family home, by contrast, we're able to refi that single family home very quickly, often in like a week. And then it starts producing cash flow right away. So there's going to be, a mix of assets in Fund 2, and that will, have an impact on kind of how quickly we start delivering cash flow. Do return all capital first before returns start? That's correct. Yes. So 100% of the proceeds are counted as a return of capital And then after that capital has been returned, that's when the returns on capital begin. Yep.
For Fund One, that's, the one that we have the most, likely scenario for. So we raised that in Q4 of 2021, and we anticipate the first distributions will start going out in Q1 of 2023. Now, at first, that will be return of capital. So let's say someone has $100,000 in that fund. In 2023, it's likely they may get, say, 5,000 to 10,000 back. 2024, another 5,000 to 10,000. 2025, they would get, say, 80,000 to get to their full 100,000. And then after that, quarterly distributions on return on capital would start. And that's that infinite rate of return period. There was an email that we sent out a few days ago in our lead up to the webinar that had some really clear modeling there. From a regulatory standpoint, it's important to know that this is a fund, which means it's a pool of assets. And so because we don't, at this moment in time, know all of the assets that will be owned by the fund, we can't say with certainty what the returns will be. So what we can say is what we've been doing for the last 10 years and how all of those assets have performed. So that's what we modeled in that email. Rachel, would you please drop the exact subject line of that email in the chat so that people can search for it? It's in your inbox. You received it within the last week. It might be in your promotions folder. It's a good time to mark us as whitelisted, so we always end up in your inbox. Our open rate is like amazing, by the way. Thank you all so much.
It's like 90%.
It's really high, and we spend a lot of time really trying to deliver, high quality information that's valuable to all of you. That's not just, spammy or cluttering your minds. We really think of someone's cognitive capacity as like the most important resource they have. So we don't want to inundate you with, stuff that's not valuable to you. And you guys clearly think that, because our open rate is like 80 or 90% on our emails. So thank you all for that. And Rachel will put the title there so that you can search for that email that very specifically lays out what the projected returns might be based on our historical outcomes.
Yeah. So one of the questions was, what's the projected IRR of Fund One at this point? I would say it's still too early to say. So we've kind of spent out that first bolus of capital, and we are going to refi the 29 single family homes we have right now. That'll return enough capital that we can go buy another, let's say 22 single family homes. We'll refi those. We can buy another 17 single family homes, refi those. We can buy another 12 single family homes or something like that. So we still have a little ways to go before I think we can get to an accurate, projection there. Once we've acquired all the assets, I think we'll be able to come up with a relatively accurate projection. But right now, the projected returns for Fund One are going to be extraordinary. Nicholas and Oliver are going to carry Fund One on their shoulders, kind of regardless of how any of the single family homes perform at this point. I think the single family homes will perform great. We're getting great pricing on some of these acquisitions, really strong cash flow out of the gate, solid cash on cash rate of returns. And we got a debt proposal that went all the way up to a 30-year amortization, which is very unheard of in commercial lending. So I think we're going to have very strong returns for Fund One. I kind of don't want to throw out a number right now, because I'm sure I'll kick myself later, but we're going to be very pleased with that final number indeed.
Absolutely. Eileen mentioned kind of a technical question about the paperwork. So I hope that someone on our team has helped you with that. If not, reach out to them, email us, schedule a time on our calendar for Eileen or anyone else.
We had one other Canadian investor that asked a question about tax, something you can potentially be subject to additional taxes if you don't structure it correctly or whatever. So we had reached out to our CPA, and one of our coaches, who happens to be a Canadian that probably invests in a lot of syndications in the United States, to just ask for some coaching on that. So we'll be sure to get back to you with whatever we find there, if our team would please note that.
As Minnesotans, we love Canadians.
They're
thank
just,
you.
Just down the street.
You all are our brethren and sisters.
Minnesota is a little bit of a Canadian province.
Yeah, we love it. Dub asked a question, is the Nara Villa real estate deal part of the fund? Yes. So that was a question we had with Fund One as well. Is Nicholas part of the fund? So a fund is a bucket of capital that we then go out and acquire real estate with it. So we're going to put all this money in the bucket, and then we're going to take a big chunk of that bucket and acquire Nara, and then acquire many other things as well. So Nara is definitely in Fund Two. anyone that invests in Fund 2 is getting a share of Nara. You know, we saw the staggering returns, the big plans we have for that community. That's what we call the cornerstone. So with Fund 1, it was Nicholas. With Fund 2, it's Nara. And that's how, you know, we intend to set up really all of our funds, is to have a very strong cornerstone asset that uses a large portion of the capital, where we can see a clear business plan to very strong returns. We're acquiring at about 25 million, and we anticipate, you know, upwards of like a $40 million valuation in not very many years. When we see something like that, we know that's a deal we have to go after. And so, you know, like Nick was saying, lots of people were asking, well, when is Fund 2 coming? When is Fund 2 coming? Put me on the wait list. I'm ready to go. And, you know, we were waiting until we found just a gem, and that gem is Nara. And anyone that's in Fund 2 has a portion of Nara. And we are closing on that July.
We have the option of an extension, and we might get better debt terms with a little bit more time to work with. So
got it. This summer,
yeah,
very soon.
Yeah.
Right. So, you know, we're kind of in that phase where we've been under contract since early April, but we didn't raise right away because we didn't want the money to just be sitting in the bank account. But we're getting close enough to closing that it makes sense to raise the capital so that we have all of that money ready to go.
Right now, every day that goes by while we're under contract works in our advantage right now. So
yeah, good question.
Does this mean that the first few years there is a return of capital versus a return on capital? Excellent question. So that's nuanced. So if you get $1 back, you know, like from the first, disbursement from the fund, is that like a return on your capital, like a certain percentage return? Is it profit, or is it a return of capital? It's a return of capital. So that's something that is different about our fund than a typical fund, or I mean, every fund handles, like, maybe cash flow is considered return of capital, maybe it's not considered return of capital. It can be really confusing the way so the way most funds are structured is what makes it confusing. From our perspective, the way we structure it is the simple way to analyze it. So every dollar you get back is a return of capital until you've gotten all your money back. And then everything beyond that is an infinite rate of return. And you don't have to do any really fancy calculations. You certainly can, and you can go do an IRR or total annualized rate of return calculation. And if anybody got, you know, I've thrown out, if you got less than a 15% total annualized rate of return on the deal after, you know, 5 or 50 years, I would be disappointed with that outcome. I don't see a scenario where you're not able to hit those kinds of targets longitudinally. But you don't have to do those calculations. Just know that you know, every dollar that's generated in profit from the deal, whether it be from cash flow, from a cash out refi, from sale proceeds, from any source, that money goes to you. That's a return of capital. And then every dollar thereafter is a return on capital at an infinite rate of return from our perspective.
Salu asked, how are distributions calculated? So essentially, you know, each quarter, all of the profits that are generated, you know, there will be a number. Of course, there's, you know, money set aside for operational reserves, those sorts of things. And then that's shared in a 50-50 split with all of the investors. So it's kind of easiest to think about, like, if we had one investor at 30 million that owned the entire fund, they would get half of it and we would get half of it after they first got their 30 million back.
Yep.
And some of our deals, some of our, you know, earlier joint ventures, we do have just one partner. So if you kind of think about it from that way, I find that that's like the most intuitive. Let's say we had someone in the fund at 30 million. Well, then they would get 10% of the 50% share that's for investors. And you just kind of do the math from there based on the amount that you're investing.
Yep.
Jeff asked a great question. Is there a mechanism to communicate with prior investors as a referral? Just trying to be careful. You know, absolutely a very important thing. We tend to guard our investors' privacy, you know, a great deal. It's something we're always kind of talking about, that many of you know each other and we're all in kind of the same groups and those sorts of things. But we don't say, you know, oh, so-and-so is invested with us or those sorts of things to protect their privacy. That being said, we have a real estate group. I saw that Rachel had responded that that's exactly what I would say. Real estate at scale. We are able to, you know, privately set up conversations for people that are very serious investors, like one-on-one with one of our investors as a referral. But, you know, the best place is to just go to the Facebook group and to talk to people there.
Or come to our in-person conference.
That's what I was going to get to.
Lots of referrals there.
like no one does this. Like no one says like, come and meet us and meet our team and walk the assets. And
it's kind of a stupid thing for us to do, right? Because you're gonna say, oh, the landscaping's messed up,
or that hallway smells funny,
this tenant is smelly. Yeah. So it's
so come and meet us. That's July 15th, 16th, and 17th. Next year we'll be in Tacoma. The year after that, we'll probably pick some, tropical, amazing destination and then circle back to Rochester. About, when I look at the RSVP list for that event, a little more than half are our current investors. So I think that kind of speaks to the relationships that we have with people. And about half are people who have not yet invested with us, or maybe they're investing with us tonight. So that's pretty exciting. But you can meet people there. So Facebook group, if you're very seriously considering investing, we can connect you with someone and come meet us in person. And then, do a call with us as well. I think your intuition to talk to other people is absolutely spot on, but, talking to us is also something that's pretty uncommon. So, we show up for people and we make ourselves very available. And as we go on, as we have, more tangible outcomes with Fund One and those sorts of things, this question will get easier to answer. We just work so hard to protect our investors' privacy. And as you become an investor, working hard to protect your privacy as well. So I hope that's a satisfactory answer. If it's not, let me know. This is something
we've gone back and forth.
Like literally tonight at dinner, I'm like, I know that our investors are going to be on the call. Should I start calling out their names? And we're like, nope, we're not going to do that. We're not going to use them to market for ourselves. That's not appropriate. But what were you going to say?
Oh, this has just been a tricky issue for us to navigate. So, lots of people ask for referral, and we might refer them to one of our investors. And then, we'll kind of ask for feedback on that conversation, where we're obviously not part of that conversation. And it's, our investors, their time is frequently very valuable. And sometimes the person asking the questions is, they are pressing them for answers they maybe don't even have. And, we invest with them. We've had good returns. Like, that's all we really care about, all we need to know. So I would say we've not necessarily had the outcomes we expected with some of those referrals, because someone will be asking them questions about operations or IRR. And so, we have those conversations ourselves. If someone's looking at investing at a 7-figure level, we can certainly, facilitate some sort of introduction, if that's like a critical thing for you. But otherwise, we like to just kind of talk to people directly and do our best to answer those questions.
And also, not just our Facebook group, but we're in lots of other Facebook groups. Go into other groups and ask people what they think about us, right? You will get the unfiltered truth there. As we get bigger, there's every group that I can think of, there are investors of ours in. I just don't call them out, to respect their privacy, but go out and hunt down our reputation. That is a very smart thing for you and everyone else to be doing.
How fast do you expect the fund to fill up? That is basically how quickly do I need to invest? So, we recommend, making your commitment as soon as you can. The fund was a third full when we started this call. It's now half full. So by that pace, it'll be done. It'll be full here in by morning, right? Probably not. I'm being facetious there.
I have an appointment at the gym at 8 a.m. So I hope not by 8 a.m.
So we had about 20 some million on the wait list. And that's why we sized the fund at 30 million. We figured that was a good number that would kind of allow everyone that really wanted to get in, and then a little bit more. We figured maybe it would take, a couple weeks or something like that to fill up. That feels like a nice pacing to us. Fund One, it was just amazing that the fund filled in a single day. It was also really chaotic. I did like 100 phone calls that weekend that we launched the fund, and I didn't particularly want to do that again. So we've tried to kind of stretch out the soft open of the fund, opening it up to our people who weren't able to get into Fund One and people on the Fund Two wait list from Fund One. So far things have gone really smoothly and to plan, if there is such a thing. So I've been really happy with how Fund Two has rolled out. I hope this will be a pattern for the future. I'm still doing 100 phone calls, but I'm doing them
over 5 days instead of 2.
It's my voice was getting hoarse. It was pretty rough. So I
was pregnant and taking care of our 3 children, and then also handling phone calls, and then trying to do all of the technical stuff as Nick was lining up the phone calls. It was awesome. Like you guys are just like so amazing. Like if that's the worst thing that happens to us, like we're living a really good life. And it's because of all of you and the trust that you place in us and in our company time and time again. So again, just thank you guys so much. Like we're just so lucky.
Yeah. So hopefully that answers your question. I recommend making that commit as soon as you can. At a minimum, sign the PPM, maybe, and if you need time to move money around to do your hard commit, remit funds, just shoot us an email and make sure that we have communication on that, or we might have to ask you to step back and make room for someone else who's able to make a hard commit right away. But yeah.
Thank you, Okem. Just dropped in. Fantastic call. I funded. Have a good night. Thank you so much for hanging with us for 3.5 hours. You're awesome, and we really appreciate it. Thank you a great deal.
We still have 50% of our peak attendance here, 3.5 hours in. That blows my mind. I'm just always shocked that people like to hang. We like to hang too. We will go all night.
You know what I was just thinking is the Zoom call like turns off at 4 hours.
Oh, so, does it?
Yeah. So
it does?
Yeah. So we have 26 minutes to go.
Whoa. Okay.
And I'll say it now that if we just poof, go away, that's what happens. So we're going to talk a little faster here.
Yeah, we got some questions to get through here.
Is there an advantage to investing more than 100,000? Does it give more priority in terms of getting your investment back? So no, there's no like priority or anything like that. We have lots of people that have come into this fund and fund one at 500, 700, 7 figures, those sorts of things. It obviously gives you more share of the fund, right? So, if someone came in at 3 million, they would own 10% of the fund, but there's no, priority or anything like that. As capital comes in for return of capital, that will just go out proportionally. And then same thing for distributions well into the future.
And that's unusual, by the way. A lot of times in these funds, like there's deals that are cut or whatever. Like we had one investor who wanted to invest a very large amount of money in the fund, and they were asking for kind of preferential treatment, privately. And that's a
tough question for us, because we want to serve everyone, but we don't have our sign here for radicalized transparency, but we're big believers in transparency and having the same deal for everyone. And this business plan goes back a decade, and it's the same for all of those investors as well.
Yeah. So it's hard to say no to those people, especially if maybe they're investing a lot of funds and they're used to cutting a deal or something like that. But that's just not how we work. Everyone gets the same deal.
Absolutely. Rashmi, you were my new favorite person, because you asked why quarterly checks for a few decades and not indefinitely if you're never leaving the deal. That is like the $1 million question, right? So in some like theoretical universe, the company is owning these assets like 500 years from now. And we all have great grandchildren or great nephews and nieces or whoever our heirs are, that are just getting checks in the mail or whatever digital thing they have at that point, and just saying like, I don't even know where this comes from. I just get this money once a quarter.
That happens in Europe, by the way. That does not typically happen in the United States. This is a very European ownership style.
Yeah. So theoretically, the fund could go for hundreds of years and have that infinite rate of return forever. We used to message it as, well, who knows when we'll sell? We'll sell when, we're 80, or I hope that our company has a great succession plan at that time and the company just keeps running it. And ironically, people didn't like that answer, which again makes no sense to us, right? I would love it if we all had our heirs, 100 years from now, collecting profit from this venture that we're putting together here tonight. So we started saying 20 or 25 years because people tend to get that. Could be 19, could be 27, could be 35. I don't know what, but we find that with that tangible number, more people get that. But you're absolutely right that it could go on indefinitely. And everyone would participate in all of the profit until everything is sold. So it's not like at 25 years, everyone's just kicked out and then we still own the properties. Absolutely not. Everyone participates in the profit until all of the assets in the fund are sold, liquidated, and then all that money is sent back out.
There's a question here I want to jump the line on because I'm surprised we haven't gotten this one. It's a critical one.
Oh, yeah. I'm really surprised we haven't had that.
Yeah. Have you ever had a capital call? So the answer is no. We've never had a capital call. And our goal is never have a capital call so that we can always say no to that question. That is a very important question for people to ask. In the event that there was a capital call, Elaine and I would be the first to step in and inject liquidity in the deal. And we would do that to defend our equity. The way the structure is laid out, if there was ever a voluntary contribution of additional capital, which there is no option for a compulsory capital call from our limited partners, which is kind of unusual, that would dilute out our equity on a one-to-one basis from your original contribution. So it'd be very lucrative for you to respond to a voluntary capital call, and it would be a significant financial loss for Elaine and I if we
and we think that's the right
liquidity.
thing to do.
Correct.
Right? If we have messed up, there should be a punishment, right? That's the correct word for it. Again, you're not going to see that anywhere else.
Yep.
Like that just doesn't exist.
Yep.
But that's what we think is the right thing to do.
Most syndications, even if the GPs are fired, they still get to keep their stake in the deal.
That's nuts.
It's totally bananas. So even in the event that they like do something illegal or whatever, they still get to keep their stake in the deal. So if there's a capital call, we do not get to keep our stake in the deal.
Absolutely. And that's a big part of the reason we stay very liquid.
Yes.
So at any given time, we have millions of dollars of liquidity to be the resource that this whole operation could need. It's never happened, but we're ready for it if it does.
Okay.
What type of financing are you looking for at Nara Villa? So we just got the proposal from Sound Community Bank, I think just like yesterday or the day before. Great bank. We've worked with them before on Garden Court West, so we have that established relationship.
Yeah, so we're looking at like approximately a 70% loan to cost loan. They'll max out at 70% of our appraised value of the asset once our business plan is complete. Once we've done all those renovations, it includes a healthy interest reserve, interest escrow, which really reduces the amount of capital we need to put into the deal. It pays all the interest payments of the deal through the life of the deal, through the life of the renovations. It's a 5-year term with a 2-1 or 3-2-1.
I think it's a 3-2-1.
3-2-1 step down prepayment penalty.
But only if it's refied with a different bank.
Yeah. So we've got tons of outs there to refinance that loan when the time comes. It'll probably be a fixed loan. Right now, we're looking at a variable loan that's right around prime with a ceiling at 6%, I think is what I saw. And we're hoping to lock that in as a fixed loan, maybe at 5.25, somewhere in that territory. I think that's probably where that loan is going to end up. A point for origination.
Half a point.
Half a point. I think. Well,
maybe I'm thinking of our single family home proposal.
Yeah.
We got like 4 debt proposals today. We work hard on debt.
Yeah, this is a very expensive loan for them to underwrite and originate because there's so many pieces to it. So right now they're offering 1.5 points origination, which feels kind of heavy to me. So we're trying to get them down to a point. It's a very delicate negotiation process because we want to do business with them and we're transparent about that, but we also want to get the best possible deal we can get on the loan.
We are at like well over 330 people that have signed up for Fund 2. Our average check size for Fund 1 was 170,000. So if that average check size just stays the same, we're at like close to like 50 million. We only have a $30 million fund. So I just want to call that out that number caught my eye there.
But it's first come, first serve on who remits capital. Yeah. So,
this is so fun. We love it. Someone asked about, maybe not having the liquidity to participate in Fund 2 at this time. Will there be a Fund 3? Yes, our hope, our big vision is a Fund 3, a Fund 4, a Fund 5, on and on and on. I anticipate that Fund 3 might open in, say, somewhere between January and March of 2023. With Fund 2, when people were asking that during Fund 1, we said summer of 2022 and we hit that target. It's hard to predict, right? We need to make sure that we are judiciously spending the money that has already been entrusted to our care and not just chasing those bigger numbers, for our own ego reasons or anything like that. But I anticipate maybe about 9 months is a latency between Fund 2 and Fund 3. And then, probably 9 to 12 months thereafter with each fund. It's likely that Fund 3 will be a little bit larger, so then there would be a longer period in between. But yes, I do anticipate Fund 3 will come kind of early 2023.
Yep.
Someone asked about the status of renovations at Nicholas and are we on target there for a refi? So lots of good stuff there in that question. So we are doing some renovations of some of the units at Nicholas. Nicholas was built in 2015, so it does not need major renovations. We are renovating maybe about 20 of the units with all new LVP, all new paint, cabinets and countertops are all brand new, bathrooms are great. We're really trying to kind of freshen it, give it a more modern look, carpets have worn out, those sorts of things. So that is all on target. We have a team member that's dedicated to Nicholas to take care of all of that.
He's doing a great job.
And then with Nicholas itself, because we have that 7-year no payment, no interest, seller carry at almost $9 million or over $9 million. It's unlikely that we will refi that specific asset anytime soon. But that's the great thing about a fund, is that all of the other assets in the fund have what's called blended returns, right? So you can think about like a bucket and they're all in there blended up together. And all of that return, we're still very much on target to return all of capital to investors. I would say at this point, we're looking at maybe 3 years. So we're still within what we've projected all along with Fund One. And then we anticipate that investors will start getting some distributions in Q1 of 2023. So we've spent all of the money. We were purchasing these single family homes. We just got a debt proposal to get $6 million back out. So we'll take that $6 million, we'll spend it all again, because we want to drive up the total amount of assets that are in Fund One, or really any other fund in the future. And so we'll do that several times. And then in about Q1 of 2023, we'll start doing distributions on Fund One. I would anticipate Fund Two will have a very similar kind of process as it unfolds.
Yep. Great question just came in. Will the fund be audited? So we spend an embarrassing amount of money on accounting. So the real estate CPA, is our accounting firm. So we meet every week with a partner in the firm. And Brandon is our personal CPA. So they do very aggressive third-party auditing of all our books. We have another consultancy called APM that does significant audit functions of all of our books. And then we also have a full-time in-house controller that we just hired, who makes sure that all the money is going where it's supposed to go. There is a staggering amount of money that flows through our books, and there are occasionally errors that, as far as I know, we've always caught. We need to make sure that we're constantly auditing those books and those accounts to make sure there's never any money that is going where it shouldn't go.
Absolutely. Yep. Good question. Michelle is one of those people that I'm just like tickled pink that she's in our fund, because she's a internationally board certified lactation consultant. And as a mother of 4, I know that's a critical role in society. So thank you for investing with us. It's a privilege to serve you. Michelle asks, 20 or 30 years from now, when the fund closes, would all of the assets get sold off, and what happens to that capital? So let's say at year 25, we sell all of the real estate that's owned by Fund Two. All of that liquidity goes back into the bucket, and then it's shared proportionally with all of the investors. And then that would be the final distribution. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Other syndications and funds will treat, capital events and dispositions and stuff differently. And that's why these questions come up. Like with us, it's all the same. It's so simple that people ask a lot of questions about it, but it's all the same.
Yep. Some of these questions we've already answered about, like the tax handling of income, return on capital versus return of capital, projected time frame for returns. Let's address this question. We have plenty of time here at the end. How much do we invest in each deal?
Yeah. So we're kind of brutally transparent about this. So a lot of fund managers and syndicators, they'll have a little bit of a shell game here where they'll say, oh, I'm going to put X number of dollars into the deal, and then say, oh, well, we had such overwhelming interest, I'm going to step back to allow more opportunity for people to invest in the deal. Or they'll take very significant fees and then count those fees as equity into the deal. Elaine and I are very transparent that it's our goal to not have any money in the deal when all is said and done. So between Elaine and I and Daniel, we have probably close to $500,000 of hard pursuit costs into this deal at this time. We shoulder those hard pursuit costs, and if the deal were to fall through, that's our loss. So we have like $300,000 in non-refundable earnest money alone in the deal at this time. And if the deal were to fall apart, that is our loss to shoulder. That's not a loss that gets passed on to our investors. And then
the townhome deal that we may get under contract, that's several $100,000 of hard earnest money that comes from us.
Yeah. Yep. I don't love the idea of non-refundable earnest money, but that's what you have to do to get the deal, and you certainly get better pricing that way. And then our goal is to reimburse ourselves at the closing table for those pursuit costs. It's critical to know that we don't really profit from those in any way, shape, or form. And there's tons of overhead expenses that we do not charge back to the fund. So for Fund One, for Q1, the only overhead expense was like $8,000 for K1 tax prep. That is a bananas, overhead expense ratio for a fund. That's a fraction of the kind of the industry standard. So there's there's a lot of accounting games here where fund managers will say, oh, I've got, skin in the game, but then they have all sorts of ways of pulling that money right back out. And it's just kind of a shell game that we have a huge disappreciation for. And the reason why we don't want to have money in the deal is because we want to keep that liquidity in reserve for a rainy day. So we have, 3 million liquid at this time. And we've got, $250 million in assets under management here in the near future. And we really need to have that level of liquidity reserves at any given time. So if hypothetically, we put, let's say 20% into the fund, we would deploy 100% of our liquidity, and we could still only raise a $15 million fund with that kind of model, and then try to use fees or something to get that money back out. It just doesn't work that way. Mm-hmm. So we're very transparent that that's our goal. But we sign on the note, which is something that most fund managers or syndicators won't do, which is something that, I don't know, that's just a point of concern for us. That doesn't compute with us. In fact, this might blow your mind a little bit. Most fund managers, syndicators, they're not able to participate in depreciation because if you actually look at the books, by SEC and IRS guidelines, they are not actually an owner in any shape or form. They're an employee of the entity that is generating all these fees. So you have to actually be an owner to participate in depreciation. Elaine and I are actually owners. We sign on the note, and we have full ownership of the asset and all the encumbrances and liabilities that go with that. So we're able to participate in depreciation potentially because we actually meet the SEC and IRS guidelines for ownership in the fund. So that's just a little bit of background on what you might see elsewhere and why we structure things the way that we do.
So I think at the end of the day, we put in as much as anyone else, which is everyone else kind of has these obfuscations. And what we say is we really respect the intelligence of our investors. So let's say we had said we were going to put $1 million into fund one, but then we collect 800,000 in quarter one. Like, let's just call a spade and say that our goal is to stay very liquid, and that protects everyone else's capital. That's why we have our capital call structure, the setup the way it is. And then, I think people should be asking, why am I investing with someone that won't sign on the note? Right? Like, that to me is like the ultimate, like, are you going to put your signature on it? And we do every single loan. We think that's really important. It speaks volumes of how much we believe in each of these deals. We're putting, our personal signature on them. And that to me is, just a tremendous amount of commitment.
And think about that critically for a second. So the circumstance you need to worry about there is one where the deal's kind of fallen apart. And in that circumstance, the person who's signing on the note is the person who's really sweating bullets. And the person who has money in the deal has way less to lose than someone who signed on the note in the event of some sort of downside event like that. Like we are going to sign on a $25 million note, versus, putting, let's say $1 million into the deal. That's a 25 to 1 advantage in favor of signing on the note there. And then signing on the note is critical because that gets us radically superior loan terms for our investors. A lot of syndicators, fund managers, they might get like a 60% LTV loan. We're able to get like a 70% LTC loan, like a radically superior loan that gives us way better returns because we have the ownership and the willingness to sign on the note.
Rachel said we're up to about 17 million. So that's pretty exciting.
Thank you. Exciting.
Thank you, everyone. We have a couple minutes here as we wrap up. Botag, you asked about IRAs. We didn't quite get into that. If anyone would like to invest out of an IRA, that is something that's possible. That would be a great thing to schedule a one-on-one call so we can talk about your specific situation. Riley or Mark or Rachel, will you put the calendar link in chat again there? Someone asked about 1031 exchange and how the government, potentially putting restrictions on that might impact the investment model. So that's the great thing is without having a sale, there's no need for a 1031. So you're going to have these tax advantages for decades, 2 decades, 2.5 decades, maybe 3 decades. So there's no need to think about, oh, I'm divesting from this thing. I need to line up this next thing to 1031 from one to the other. We've never done a 1031. You don't have to do a 1031 if you don't ever sell.
Well, yeah, we never sold.
So it's a great way to have tax advantages. The best way to have tax advantages is just to never recapture your depreciation. And that's what we're going to set everyone up for. And push that depreciation recapture out as long as humanly possible.
There's a question: how are the expenses of renovating and managing paid for if there's no fees? There's a property management fee, just like would have otherwise been paid to a third party property management group. And in the case of Daniel's organization, as well as our own, it's a 10% all-in fee, so significantly lower than the industry standard. It's not exactly a profit center for either of our operations, but it's how we really drive amazing returns to the assets. So that's how those costs are paid for.
Yep. We don't charge things like project management fees, all sorts of
markup invoices.
Yep. Yeah. That's a big one that I just forget about, because we just have such a hopelessly simple model that I forget that most property management companies, if let's say the plumber charges $100 to the property, it would be billed as $110. Yep. We don't do those shenanigans. Yep.
All these little opaque things, just there's a million little slivers like that. Yeah.
Yep. I'm looking for kind of newer questions, the things that we might have not answered yet. I think we're kind of hitting where we've kind of answered the general theme of most questions. Mm-hmm. Someone asked, is it recommended to invest as an individual or an LLC? We're not attorneys. We don't give legal advice. Ask your attorney. There's such limited liability in this structure because you're limited partners, that investing as an individual is likely fine. If you have an LLC, maybe it makes sense to use it. Ask your specific advisors. I would say probably 70% of people invest as individuals, and maybe 30% are some combination of LLC, trust, those sorts of things, good IRAs, those sorts of things.
Yep. Someone ran through some math and came up with a best case scenario of an IRR of about 22%. So the SEC does not very much frowns on quoting any kind of IRR for a private equity fund, because we don't know what assets are going to be involved and stuff. But I'd say that you're in the ballpark for a best case scenario.
I think we've kind of hit most of the questions that have been asked.
How much depreciation would you get? We shoot for $1 for $1. So if you put in 100K, our hope is we'll get you 100K in depreciation sooner or later. And we've been able to hit that number in the past.
Let's call it a night. Thank you all. More than half of you have stayed the entire time.
It's crazy.
It means so much to us. Time is the most valuable thing that any of us have, time, and then our cognitive capacity to make decisions. And so thank you for hanging with us. If we have not answered your question, or you just have another question, or you want to see clarification or anything, schedule a time on our calendars. We'd love to talk with you one-on-one. I've seen from Rachel that she says, tomorrow will be a big Invest Next troubleshooting day, which is exactly what to after Fund 1. So we're happy to make ourselves very available to everyone to get all of that paperwork and everything through. We're well over 30 million at this point. Or was that what you were pointing at?
No, I was pointing at David's question there. I thought that was a good one.
Go for it.
With all the money you're raising up front, how do you balance the need for discipline on making good acquisitions versus the need to get the money working? So this is where our fund structure really shines. So a fund that's paying out a pref and has a waterfall and all these fees, there's really bananas incentives at work there. Mm-hmm. So the expression I use is, in most funds, your money is burning a hole in their pocket. They have this huge incentive to spend that money, even if it's maybe not the best deal. We lost so many deals in Q1 of this year. We had $8 million in cash just sitting in the bank, and we bought 2 houses because everything was just so expensive, and we knew that those prices were going to come down. In any other fund structure, that money would have gotten deployed, and I think maybe someone would have overpaid. Mm-hmm. So, we're incentivized to deploy that capital so that it can start earning a return, so we can return capital, so we can make money, several years from now. So we want to deploy that capital as quickly as we can so we can eventually profit. But the worst thing we could do is buy a bad deal, mm-hmm. because it'll take a long time. It'll take, 5 years or more for us to return capital. It doesn't make sense
to spend capital, say 2 months faster, but get a deal that it takes an extra year mm-hmm. to generate the return. And again, we include kind of that, we'll call it a latency period in the overall mm-hmm. projection when we say, let's say a 3-year hold, kind of 5-year worst case scenario, we include any of that time. It's really helpful to have what's called a fully funded private equity fund, mm-hmm. so that when we're making offers, we're taken very seriously. So that's mm-hmm. why we raise in this way. It can help get us to the top of the pile and can help us to get maybe a minor discount that, again, improves the overall rate of return in the
You're
deal.
bringing a gun to a knife fight. That's why we got that call about the $10 million deal that we could put an offer on, because we called all the brokers and said, we have a fully funded private equity fund that's looking for, things to buy. Please call us when there's something to buy.
Yep. All right.
Yeah.
Shall we call it a night?
I think we shall. It's been a blast. We love just this is our idea of a good time. So if there's any further questions we haven't gotten to, feel free to block time on our calendar. Otherwise, yeah, please feel free to move forward with your commitment in the portal. We're processing commits on a first come, first served basis. It's just it's an honor to have the opportunity to serve everyone here. It's not lost on us how serious of a responsibility this is. And we can't wait to serve you in funds too.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.